Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is an open Q&A today. I'm doing open Q&As all the way through this season of House of the Dragon. So what we're going to do is we're just going to, I'd say, dot around between lots of different questions. Hopefully we'll try and keep some sort of structure to this. Obviously there will be lots of questions about House of the Dragon. We had episode 2 just over the weekend. Episode 3 is coming up soon. But I'm also taking questions on the other things that I cover on this channel. So if you've got wider Song of Ice and Fire questions, Lord of the Rings questions, we can answer them as well. But let's start focusing in on House of the Dragon. I thought, just as an intro to this, I thought episode 2 was fantastic. I thought it was really good. The emotional impact there of what happened with these two guys, Eric and Arik, was far in excess of what I was expecting, I have to say, and I thought that they landed that really, really well. So, spoiler warning here. If you've not seen episode 2, we will be talking about that quite a lot. But the general spoiler policy on this channel is book spoilers are fine. The books have been out for a while. Show spoilers are not okay. Show spoilers, in this case, being stuff for future episodes. If it's happened in the past, if it's in a trailer, we're all okay to talk about it. So that side of things are cleared away. Let's get straight into it. And as always, I'm taking questions from my patrons and also any questions that are popping up in the chat. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. I'm doing this live on YouTube. I'm also streaming live on X. Hi, if you're there on X. I haven't managed to figure out how to get the chat working there as well yet, but I am working on it. So for the time being, questions are just coming from YouTube. But let's start with a question from Rasla, saying, "Good day, Robert. Hope all is well. The show seemed to linger on the coin that Aemond picked up. Do you think this coin will somehow come into play later in the show, perhaps a heads or tails situation playing out?" Yeah, it did very much. If you remember, right at the beginning of the episode, you get the aftermath of Blood and Cheese. Lots of people running around screaming, taking out bloody bedclothes, things like that. And we had just a few seconds of Aemond walking around a room, checking a few entrances. He knelt down, he picked up a coin. And the camera kind of like panned into the coin, and it gave it quite a bit of significance. Now, a lot of people were wondering, what is this coin significant? Well, as far as I can tell, that particular coin is not a special coin. We're not supposed to go, "Oh, that's a coin from the Reach, therefore we need to be looking for some link." That wasn't what was going on. If you will remember, the previous evening, he and Criston Cole had been sat there and they got their big map out and they were doing some planning. If they were in charge, this is what they would do. And as little markers for armies and the like, they used coins and they were shifting them around on the map. Now, during Blood and Cheese, you will have noticed perhaps that I think it was Blood stumbled into a room, saw a bunch of coins on the table, grabbed them up, and went away. This is obviously before they found Helena's room and Jaehaerys. Now, that was this room, Aemond's room, that he'd been discussing things with Criston Cole. Those were the coins that he found. He found the coins that they were using, and he didn't get them all. One of them fell on the floor. And so Aemond came in to the room, picked up a coin that was on the floor, and realized what had happened. This is him figuring out somebody had come to his room, somebody had stolen the coins that were on there. In a bit of a rush job, they didn't pick up all of the coins, and then they went off. And that is what tells Aemond that actually, from his perspective, he was the target, which he's right, he was the target. So that is where that is going, as far as we can tell. This wasn't some kind of like, analyze this particular coin, where's this from, what does that mean? This was Aemond, as far as we know, he doesn't tell anyone this, but figuring out for himself that he was the target, which will have an impact on him personally. He now thinks that Daemon was targeting him because his ego suggests that means that he's an equal in some way to Daemon. Daemon sees him as the big threat over there on Team Green. So that's what the implication was. They didn't message that hugely well, but I think that's where they were going with it. Stephanie Brindle, thank you very much for the super chat, just saying 7 blessings, friends, and to you. Rassler also asking, in the show so far, what we have seen of Hugh Hammer is in stark contrast to how he's described in the book. Do you foresee something bad happening to his family that will lead him down a darker path? Yeah, so we have seen, and this was a bit of surprise for those of us who have been largely staying away from spoilers. We saw Hugh Hammer appear in episode 1 and then again in episode 2. And this was a surprise because he appeared in King's Landing. Now, in the book, he's one of the dragon seeds. He's one of these people who puts themselves forward saying, I've got Valyrian ancestry. I want to try riding a dragon. Now, that happens on Dragonstone. So it was a bit of a surprise to see him appear here in King's Landing. And he obviously appears here, first of all, with some fellow smiths. He's a smith, and they were basically saying with the blockade, it's got quite hard. There's a lot of demands on us in our time right now, in a time of war. Is there any chance we could get slightly better payment sort of processes going on so that we can get a bit of the money up front? That would really help out. And Aegon on the throne is like, yeah, that's fine. Now, he was in that mode trying to look good for the small folk. He clearly loved the adulation of the small folk. But so whether he actually meant that is a different matter. Certainly, the Red Keep seems to be slightly distracted at this moment, so that's hardly going to be top of his mind. We then see Hugh Hammer there with what appears to be his family, whether that's his wife, a small child, and we get this conversation about, you did have that, the king did promise that you get better payment terms, and it's like, yeah, but has anything happened? No. So what do we make of all of this? He does come across undeniably better than he does in the book. In the book, we're not given huge amounts of detail about him, but he is basically described as sort of a brute of a man. And once he does claim his dragon, he's out drinking a lot with Ulf the White. We'll talk about him in a moment. And of course, he turns cloak. He starts getting these visions and dreams of becoming king himself. And this is a lot of people. There's a prophecy, which I'm sure that they will play. They seem to really like prophecy in House of the Dragon. There's a prophecy about him and his hammer and taking the throne and things like this, which is almost certainly actually about Robert Baratheon many, many years later. Big guy, big hammer, but he takes this as about him. So he doesn't come across very well in the book, it has to be said. However, here on the TV show, so far, we're kind of like wanting to have some sympathy for him. Now, what you're suggesting, Russell, is this kind of like a dark part? I suggested this in my breakdown video. This does seem to be a reasonable starting position for, in a few episodes' time, ending up in Dragonstone. If he's been promised something by the king, if he's got a personal reason why he needs this extra flexibility, this extra money, he's got a sick child he needs to be looking after, that cannot happen on in King's Landing. There will almost certainly be a riot happening quite soon as well. Conditions will get even worse. The blockade's going to stay. Less food is coming in. Things are going to get worse and worse. Now, is it possible that something really tragic happens to him, his family, which leads him down a darker path? Yeah, I think that's entirely possible. Or maybe he just heads out trying to get a job, money elsewhere. Either way, they've set him up to be quite a sympathetic character and a backstory that will allow us to at least understand where he's coming from if he does go down uh, something less sympathetic as a character arc. So I think this is quite typical of what we've seen of House of the Dragon so far. They have, and we talked about this on Sundays. In case you missed it, on Sundays I do a pre-show live stream. Starts at the same time. We go for a couple of hours or so, talk about the episode that is about to air. And we talked then quite a bit about how in the show and this is not necessarily always a bad thing, sometimes it's been very good, they have tried to add extra layers to characters who came across as quite, I wouldn't say two-dimensional in the book, but unsympathetic characters. Characters like Otto, for example, characters like Alicent, even Daemon, who come across in the book as really not very pleasant. Now we're starting to dig into a little bit about what might be lying underneath there. And we're seeing the start of that even with Aegon the Second, and Aemond, I think perhaps. So this seems very like them to try and add this extra layer in. Question from Lion Vigilance, saying, "Hi, Robert. First time watching you live. Oh, welcome. It's fantastic to have you. After watching Helena's reaction to the procession, has your opinion about the potential autism idea changed?" Yeah, I've got a question about this coming up, but I'll happily address this now. So, what I've said before on this subject, happy to say again, I don't personally think I'm qualified to sort of say exactly what symptoms are being shown there, but I think it's pretty clear that they are, I think the phrase is autism coding her, in as much as what seems to happen there on that procession, and beforehand she just does not wish to engage with people that she does not know, and she gets incredibly stressed by that situation. And just as a kind of a throwaway, I do wonder, in some of the pre-season trailers, we did have a few images of what looked like the two of them, Alicent and Helena, sort of running whilst wearing those kind of what looked to me like the same clothes that they were wearing. So I don't know whether or not there's like a deleted scene, maybe what happened at the end of that procession. I'm not 100% sure. But here, that's a complete aside. But here, in terms of Helena, yeah, I think it's reasonably clear to me that they are what we would probably say autism coding her. Now, that is mixed up with her dragon dreaming, so it's not always very clear. And in the book, she's called things like simple. Here, she's called special and things like that, which is kind of paternalistic derogatory language, which is often used for autistic people. So yeah, I mean, I don't think my view has changed, but I think it is pretty clear what kind of coding they're putting on this, if that makes sense. Auntie Slayer says, Alicent tries to talk to Helena about her sleeping with Criston and tries to confess to Otto, and neither seem to care or want to know more. Do you think Alicent secretly wants people to know? I think Alicent, from what we've seen, she wants absolution. She wants someone to forgive her. She thinks that she's done terrible things, and I mean, I think in this specific instance, I think that there's a huge amount of guilt about the war as a whole. But in this particular instance, she's very aware that if Criston Cole hadn't been in her bedchamber at that point, there's a fair chance, well, he should have been outside, either outside her door or somewhere else, and he probably would have seen what was going on and maybe even prevented it. And so it was, in her mind, indirectly perhaps her fault that her grandson died. So that's what's going on. I think that she needs somebody to forgive her. I think it's as simple and as straightforward as that. One thing which, again, I said in my breakdown video, but I think is really important, that they showed so many times in this episode, is people, they just weren't talking. to each other. Alicent and Criston Cole don't actually talk about what's going on. They just sort of quickly check in with each other. She, as you say, talks to Otto and says, I've done terrible things, and he's just like, I don't want to know. She talks to Helena. Helena doesn't want to talk about the things. She walks in. I thought it was an incredibly sad scene. She walks in on Aegon, who is there crying, and she just stares at him for a moment and then walks away. There's no comfort there. There's no talk there. This is incredibly dysfunctional, and we're supposed to see this as incredibly dysfunctional. But yeah, in terms of does she want people to know, this perhaps could be a next bit to this, is that if you feel incredibly guilty, you think that you need some sort of punishment, then maybe she thinks that people should know and she should be shamed for it. That's a kind of a psychological leap. But at the moment, I think the main thing is forgiveness. Yeah. Question from Commander Ray, who's been a channel member for 7 months. I think you're my longest standing channel member, Commander Ray. So thank you very much for that. And if you're a channel member, incidentally, the best way to support this channel, if you wish to do so, is via Patreon. But another way to do that is becoming a member of the channel. There's a button around somewhere. But that occasionally gives you free super chats, things highlighted, which means that I spot them. The chat moves through very quickly. I spot them much more easily. Commander Ray says, why are dragons so hard to work with? They fire everyone. Oh, thank you. Much appreciation to you and Dan and the hardworking mods. Well, thank you very much. I thought that was going to be a serious question, but it turns out it was a funny one. Thank you very much indeed for that. Steve Ash Lerner Turner, also normally with a joke. What's the worst word to hear from a nuclear physicist? Oops. Okay. The Danes from Essos. Danes have most likely Lightbringer. Dane is the House Dane's original founder, Azor Ahai. Well, I mean, this is going off into A Song of Ice and Fire. Deep lore. Happy to sort of quickly pick up on this one before we come back into House of the Dragon. So House Dane, for those who are not 100% aware, very ancient house based down in Dorne. This is where Ned Stark, he goes to House Dane immediately after the Tower of Joy. Arthur Dane is Rhaegar's best mate, one of the Kingsguard at the Tower of Joy. Ashara Dane, there's a whole different set of issues going on with Ashara Dane, but she's a fascinating and intriguing character. The house as a whole is based on this island called Starfall, and their founding legend is that their people came from the east following a shooting star which landed on this island, Starfall, and that's where they made their home base. And from the meteor, they forged this sword, Dawn. Now, yes, this is a leading theory amongst A Song of Ice and Fire fans that the sword Dawn is Lightbringer. This is the original sword that the original Azor Ahai wielded, which helped win the first long night. Dawn being obviously the end of a long night. And the holder of the sword Dawn has the title, the Sword of the Morning. So it all kind of adds up. It clearly is an incredibly ancient sword. My instinct is, yes, that is what is going on there. Does that necessarily mean that House Dane were the original, or the founder of House Dane was the original Azor Ahai? No. What that means is that House Dane are the holders of and the keepers of the Sword of Dawn. Complete digression, but one of my favorite mini theories that kind of fits the facts, but we don't have any evidence to push it any more than this kind of fits the facts, is that it's very noticeable that the key things that you might need if the others were to attack again are on islands. The Isle of Faces seems to be the heart of the Weirwood network. The Dragonglass mine is on the island of Dragonstone, and here this sword, which we think is Lightbringer, is being held on the island of Starfall. So there's a lot of interesting things, potentially valuable things on islands. I hope that kind of answered that. I kind of whisk through that. That's the kind of thing that I can do like 100 videos on, and I've done quite a few on. Michelle Nimo saying, can we talk about sea smoke appearing to Adam? Yes, I was so excited, and it appears Sea Smoke is sending him a sign. I also got the feeling Adam sensed him as well by the look on his face before Sea Smoke properly flew over. Yeah, so we met, as well as Hugh Hammer, we've now met Adam Velaryon. Now, so this is the second dragon seed out of 4 that we will eventually get. Now, Adam Velaryon is there, and he's on the beach, finding. I'm not really a beachcomber, so I don't know whether that's mussels or cockles or something along those lines. He was getting, and then Sea Smoke, the dragon, flies over him. Now, Sea Smoke was Laenor Velaryon's dragon, and this is the dragon that Adam will eventually claim in the dragons, and in sort of the sowing of the seeds as a dragon seed. So they're clearly setting this up. Did he kind of sense him? Yeah, there was something going on there, but the show has got a huge nerdy lore issue that they need to deal with here. And they're aware of this. Don't worry. It's not like they're sort of going to be blundering into this, not sure about what's going on. They are fully aware of this. That as far as we are aware, a dragon can only have one one bonded rider at any given moment in time. Now, in the book, Laenor Velaryon died. He was killed pretty unambiguously. It was witnessed. People saw it. People saw his dead body. And that meant that Sea Smoke had no owner. Well, not owner, but no rider. And so Adam Velaryon could claim Sea Smoke, all well and good. The TV show changed what happened. So Laenor didn't die. That was a fake death. He headed off to live his best life over in Essos. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean when Adam Velaryon, assuming Adam Velaryon will bond with Sea Smoke, we're expecting that, does this mean that they're going to just hand wave it away and just assume that it's okay? A dragon can have 2 bonded riders, but if the human abandons the dragon, that breaks the bond. Are we going to come to an assumption that Laenor must have died off screen? There are a number of different avenues that they could go down with this. I think the key here will be Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra knows that Laenor is still alive. Most other people, almost everyone else, thinks he's dead. So it's not an issue for anyone else. And so if she suddenly finds someone else bonding with her ex-husband's dragon, that will lead to a huge number of questions in her mind. And in fact, there was a sort of it wasn't 100% clear, but there was a shot in one of the preseason trailers of what looked like her and Adam Velaryon there having a conversation on the beach. So perhaps that's what's going on there. As for Sea Smoke sending him a sign, I mean, I don't know about that. I would quite go that far, but definitely him being aware of Sea Smoke. Yes, no, they're setting that up. Jacob Amable-Lena saying, good evening, Robert, in every sense. And thank you. And to you, I'm going to take that as a Gandalf reference. Do you think that it's a coincidence that Aemon's type when it comes to women may reflect that the almost maternal connection that he has with his dragon, Vhagar? Interesting. So they certainly are seemingly setting up this idea that he likes the older woman. The woman he seems to be seeing down in Flea Bottom is clearly an older woman. We know later on he and Alice Rivers will get together. So, and it doesn't appear as if this is a hugely sexual thing. There's actually some other kind of psychological need being met there. Why? I mean, trying to dive into the psychology of a character is always quite good fun. I think that Alicent doesn't appear to have been a particularly close mother to them. So that may well be that he's looking, and he's created this image of himself that perhaps he doesn't always deep down live up to in his own heart. I think the link across to Vhagar is very interesting because, yes, Vhagar accepted generally as a female dragon, though the exact mechanics of dragon sex and gender is perhaps more fluid than we sometimes think, because this is what Septon Bath says, and if Septon Bath says something, then we normally have to accept it as probably right. But if we've got Vhagar, this very old and large female dragon that he bonded with when in the books he was 10 years old. Now on the show he looked a bit older than that, it has to be said, but in the books he was 10 years old when that happened. And here again, seemingly his first experience with a woman, and the woman that he goes back to is with an older woman, and then another person that he seems to fall for is another older woman. Yeah, there's definitely some kind of theme going on here, and I think the Vhagar thing only kind of adds to it, I would say. Have I got another question? Oh, Kelly Summers. Is there anything to fight the others in the Iron Islands or Castle Rock? If you're going down my islands thesis, Castle Rock is a big rock, but it's not an island. As for the Iron Islands, I mean, my take is no. Um, if you were looking for more islands that perhaps have got something interesting going on, then you might look at the Quiet Isle, for instance. But yeah, it's just it's an observation rather than I mean heading towards tinfoil, I think, but it's an observation of what seems to fit. Sophie saying, "Hi, Robert. I loved Mysaria this episode. She seemed to be simpatico with Rhaenyra. I'm curious on where you think they're going with her character. Could we get a Spymaster war with her against Larys?" Well, I certainly thought that was what was going to happen. At the end of season 1, I think I even did a video on it, but at the end of season 1, I thought this was where they were going with this, that she'd set up this spy network, for want of a better phrase. Larys was setting up and had set up his own spy network. And at the end, it was in episode 10, perhaps, we were all distracted by the Alicent foot thing going on with Larys. But while that was going on, and we weren't really paying attention to what they were talking about, Larys was asking for permission to take out Mysaria's spy network. And basically he got it. So I thought this would be a pretty clear segue into season 2, where she has her own spy network and comes back at him, or comes back at Team Green. Whether she will be able to distinguish between the different parts of Team Green, I wasn't sure. Now, they've slightly changed this in that she seems to have, changed this, they didn't quite go down that route, in that she seems to have left King's Landing. It looks like she was heading away, looks like she'd almost given up. But the fact that and it almost certainly was her who spotted Arik coming up and realized what was going on, she saved the day. She didn't have to. There was absolutely no reason for her to go back and help Rhaenyra. So that will have won her the trust of Rhaenyra. And we do know that she was, to all intents and purposes, Mistress of Whisperers for Rhaenyra when she gets to King's Landing. So my best guess is what's going to happen is we're going to have her coming on to Team Black, joining up with Rhaenyra. They've got a complex relationship with their own in previous relationships with Daemon. Obviously, Rhaenyra is still going, but he has now gone away. So I think we will just see her as part of Team Black and heading back. Whether this then becomes a spy war does depend, I think, a lot on what happens with Larys. Because if they decide to keep Larys in King's Landing, then that might work like that. If they decide to take him out and follow the Dragonstone plot, then perhaps we won't see so much of a clash. Okay, I think that is me caught up in the chat. George in the chat just saying, "Hey, long-time viewer and love your content." Well, thank you very much. Wondering if you've ever considered doing some Elden Ring lore. George R. Martin had a hand in creating the universe. It's incredibly popular. Yeah, I mean, I've considered it. I've not played the game. I've sort of seen some gameplay. I'm aware of Elden Ring, and I know lots of people love it. So it's not top of my list, I have to say. But yeah, maybe sometime I'll add it to the list of things when I get a bit more time. I will have a look into. Magma Frost 13. Rhaenyra denied Jace's proposal to keep a watch on King's Landing on Dragonback, but immediately afterwards sends Baelor to do the same job. What do you think her reasoning was? The obvious but ungenerous interpretation is that Rhaenyra doesn't see Daemon's children as her own, despite having raised them for several years at this point. A less well-evidenced, but not impossible alternative might be that perhaps Baelor is a better dragon rider, or Moondancer is in some way more suited to the role. She does have disproportionately large wings in the trailers. Perhaps she's faster than Vermax. What do you think? So the first thing to point out, I think, is that Baelor and Rhaena have been markedly aged up in the TV show. Jace has as well, but they've been markedly aged up. Now, what that has meant is that in the book, basically, I mean, Baelor and Rhaena want to be involved. They want to be more involved than they are, but they take largely a back seat for most of the first part of the dance. That seems less reasonable if you've got Baelor with the dragon now looking really quite grown up, to be honest. So there's no real reason not to be including her doing some reconnaissance work at least. As for why she kept Jace back, I think you could go down, as you say, the ungenerous route of saying that she sees Baelor as being more disposable. I think a more generous way of saying it is that Rhaenyra has, in the last few days, lost 2 of her children. And I can completely understand, and I'm sure we all could completely understand if she goes, actually, I'm going to try and keep the rest of my children, for the time being, out of harm's way. Because there's no doubt that sending Baelor to just keep an eye on King's Landing, that's where Vhagar is. And with the best will in the world, that is a dangerous assignment. So uh, I I think we can just, without saying that she doesn't value Baelor and Rhaena, I think we can say that she just she wants to protect her own children right at this precise moment in time. And Baelor does seem to be, from what we've seen, certainly quite a good shot with her crossbow, and therefore, if she takes after her mother, probably quite a good dragon rider. So it seems like a simple, practical, pragmatic answer. Magma Frost 13 saying or asking, do you think that Rhaenys's comments to Alicent about holding power as a woman have affected how Alicent handles Aegon? Now, I'm assuming you're talking here back in episode 9 of season 1, when Alicent comes to Rhaenys's chamber and basically said, really sorry for locking you up. And just tries to get her onto Team Green. Now, Rhaenys is having none of it, but Rhaenys does say a few interesting things. And what she says is, we do not rule, we being women, we do not rule, but we may guide the men that do. And then she says to Alicent, you desire not to be free, but to make a window in the wall of your prison. Have you ever imagined yourself on the Iron Throne? She kind of whispers that in her ear. Now, it was, I thought, a really good and interesting conversation because basically Rhaenys has gone through this. And this is what Rhaenys's role in conversations with a lot of characters is that she has gone through not being the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. She has come to terms with that. Yes, she has some baggage from it, I'm sure, but broadly speaking, she has accepted the fact that this moment has passed by. She is that herself never going to rule the Seven Kingdoms, and probably no woman will either. That's conversations she has with Rhaenyra. This is a conversation she has here with Alicent. She has similar conversations with her husband Corlys. There are echoes of it in conversations she has with Daemon. She is clearly in a quite good mental space with this. But the challenge to Alicent is an interesting one because what we see from Alicent is a lot more proactive approach to trying to manage Aegon. She even in episode 2, she and Otto are even there saying, well, Aegon will get a bit bored for after a while playing being king and we can take back control again. And so that does now seem to be Alicent's approach, is that she does not want power herself, but she wants to be able to have power through someone else. And Rhaenys kind of sees that and sort of challenges her on it and say, have you never thought about yourself being on the Iron Throne? Is like, I think the answer is that the thought may well have crossed her mind, but that's not where she wants to be. But the power of the Iron Throne, that's definitely still there. A Greet Weirwood saying, I need to watch a video about the numbers game in the Council of 101. Who voted? That is absolutely fascinating. I think I did a video not specifically just on the numbers game, but it's suspicious as anything in that we're told that the for those who don't know, the Great Council of 101, the very first scene we get in House of the Dragon season 1, when we get old King Jaehaerys and he's there and he's decided, he's said to the Lords of the Realm, you get to vote on who's going to be my heir. And they kind of shifted a few things around for the TV show, but on the TV show they showed this was between Viserys and Rhaenys. In the books, then by that point it was Laenor really was the main option over on their side. But we're told that the votes came in 95% for Viserys, which sounds immediately like the kind of voting figures that you only see in really quite corrupt elections. This dictator had an election and they won 95% of the popular vote. It's like, really? 19 out of every 20 people voted for you? So that's we're immediately supposed to be suspicious about that. And then we're told, so House Stark voted the other way, as did House Baratheon, as did House Bracken, as did House, I think, Manderley, and a few others. I think House Celtigar, and you kind of listen to go. So that doesn't feel like a 95%. Maybe Viserys did get the majority of the votes, but the only people who were in charge of the election, the Maesters, the only people who knew the result of the election, counted the votes, were in charge of the entire process, the Maesters. They're the ones who then said yes, and it was 95%. Nobody else would know. Nobody else could challenge it. So, deeply suspicious. Um, let's go to a question from Moon. In the last episode, we saw Aemond in the arms of a sex worker. Is she the same as in season 1 when he was looking for Aegon? In that encounter, it appeared as though they hadn't seen each other for some time. Did Aemond recently take up the habit of visiting sex workers? And what would have inspired him to do that? Well, yes, it's the same person. And yes, the implication was that he'd not been there for some time, and so him going back to her probably was partly jogged by him seeing her there, and I think we're probably, and we'll have to see where they go with his character, but they're probably going to start increasingly showing us underneath this brash exterior from Aemond. We've already seen a few cracks, but he needs someone to talk to. He's just in his mind probably sparked a war when he killed Luke, as that's how the world sees it. When he killed Luke, then that was the first proper casualty. If you forget Lord Beesbury, actually in the Green Council, the first proper casualty of the war. Now, that wasn't him. It wasn't actually his fault, but he doesn't want to admit that, and so he does have this kind of need now to, as Alicent, his mother, did, a kind of a interesting parallel, to kind of get, if not forgiveness, then someone to actually just listen to him. So I think that's what it was. His memory got jogged, and he had a traumatic event, and he wanted to go and talk to someone. Disputed Lands. Hi, Amanda. Fantastic channel. If you've never checked out Disputed Lands, please do. I'm sure someone in the chat will leave a link there. Just saying, I mean, he just killed his cousin, started a war, had someone sent to kill him. He needs to decompress. Exactly. Yeah, I agree completely. Let's go to a question from Magmafrost13. Do you think Hugh Hammer's daughter could end up being Nettles? I don't think it's terribly likely, but maybe it's in the realm of possibility. Perhaps if someone could track down the actress who plays Hugh's daughter, it might offer an answer one way or the other. So I don't know the actress. Somebody in the chat, feel free if you wish to chase this down. My instinct is probably no. What I hope is that we get something with Nettles. We've not had any confirmation of Nettles, as I've said, I think last time. What is noticeable is that Ryan Condal, the showrunner, is very guarded talking about Nettles, avoids talking about Nettles as much as is possible. And that could be for a number of different reasons. That could be that he wants Nettles to be a surprise when she turns up. That could be that Nettles isn't going to be in this season, is going to arrive next season, and so he wants to talk about what's happening in this season. There are lots of completely innocent reasons why that might be. So we shouldn't necessarily jump to the conclusion that Nettle has been cut or changed in some way. But what I'd like, whenever Nettles does appear, there should be a break between those first 3 dragon seeds, claiming those dragons, and then Nettles, because they all, as far as we can tell, the call went out, everyone went and queued up and tried to claim their dragons, and sometimes it worked, and a lot of the times it didn't. Nettles took a much slower, longer approach, and only at the end did she actually claim Sheepstealer, the dragon. And it should be a surprise to everyone. Who's this? who's this person? We don't know who she is. There's no there's no context here. She's just described rather disdainfully, it has to be said, by the maesters as a little brown girl. Um, and the question is, does she even have any Valyrian heritage? Nobody really knows where she comes from. So in the book, no, the Hugh Hammer daughter thing I don't think works. On the show, might they do that? I guess they could, but I think that they would then have to change Hugh Hammer's storyline, because I don't think that what he does over the course of the war would match very well with the idea that his daughter is alive and well and a dragon rider. I'm much more in line with the idea that something terrible happens to his daughter, or he thinks something terrible is about to happen to his daughter, so he has to go off and do a dramatic last gasp effort. I mean, what if the only way he can? I mean, I hope that the dragon. I hope that the writers have got a slightly better idea than this, but to give a flavor is like, how on earth are we going to get the money to buy the medicine that we need in order to heal her? Well, I hear that over on Dragonstone they're allowing people to try and claim a dragon, and if you do claim a dragon, then you get all these riches and things like that. Well, that sounds like the best way for me to go and get the money to save my daughter. That would be a way that they can go and do it. And I don't think it would work with Nettles being his daughter. Andrew Kay saying the most impressive aspect with Nettles to me is she essentially is from the streets with no help or guidance. With a sheep stealer bond, it wouldn't feel nearly the same via Arena. Yeah, I mean, this is another rumor that is circulating, that they might use Arena as a sort of a substitute for Nettles. My instinct is no, they're not going to. They might in the short term. In fact, they might use Baylor as a kind of a dragon rider. She wasn't really used, as I said in the book, for the first part of the war, so they might upgrade her. But I still have hope we'll get Nettles, just maybe not now. Maybe not until next season, which will be very frustrating for people. Jay saying, "Hey Robert, hope you're well. Sorry if I missed this in the streams for episode 1, but can you speak about Alicent's mother being Alyn Florent and the Florents more generally? How does this impact the story?" Well, it's quite interesting. So we're not told in the book. We're not told who Alicent's mother is, and she's not really mentioned. It has to be said. It's we're told that she is brought when Otto Hightower comes to King's Landing. She is there, but at some point she seems not to be there. So presumably at some point she died, but she's not given a name or anything. We get a name here when Alicent is lighting the candles. She lights one for Alyn Florent, which is like, so this is her mother. Now, the interesting, I think, quite interesting backstory to this is that the showrunner, or showrunners as it was at the time, there were 2 showrunners for season 1, Miguel Sapochnik as well, plus Rhys Vance and Emily Carey, who played young Alicent. They got together, and Emily Carey was like, I don't know, I want to know a bit more about the background to my character. And she was allowed to, with them, kind of workshop this idea of who her mother was, because it's not in the book and it wasn't in the script. And she said she wanted a bit more background. So they said, yeah, okay, work it up. We'll agree this between us, because this is Otto's wife as well. So Rhys Vance obviously had an input too. And so we get this name. And we also get, Emily Carey told us, we get the detail that she was quite a pious, quite a religious person, which is where Alicent's religious streak comes from, and it's where her feeling of needing to repent, needing to get forgiveness comes from, because her mother drummed this into her when she was much younger. Now, as I say, that's not in the book, but this is actually, I think, a really good bit of actors and showrunners working together to add another layer in there and to try and give a little bit of a more rounded background to characters. So I like that. As for House Florent, more broadly, House Florent are quite a significant house down in the Reach. They're an old house. They trace lots of houses in the Reach, trace their heritage back to Garth Greenhands. House Florent are one of many. They believe that they were probably better suited to take over as the Lords Paramount when House Gardner was ended during the Aegon's invasion. The Tyrells were put in place. House Florent were one of the houses who thought maybe they should have got it instead. So they're old, they're impressive, they're in A Song of Ice and Fire story, they're still one of the most sort of highborn of noble families. So you get Stannis, for example, married Selyse, she was a Florent. And the only other thing to note is that they traditionally have quite large ears. That's what we're told, which it has to be said, the Alicent on the show doesn't seem to. But I think that's it. We're not supposed to see this as being a particularly significant thing. This is just a good marriage down in the Reach, and maybe if we get Otto heading down there, maybe we'll get a bit more of the politics of the Reach later in the season. I hope so. That would be quite fun. We've never really dug into that on the show, so that might be quite a nice little extra angle to come in at. Let's go to Mr. Actually, you did a second question. Actually, Jay, let's answer that one quickly. My other question is, which Fire and Blood in-book source do you think the show is most closely resembling? Anything they've done to validate Mushroom's telling that stood out to you? Well, so none of the sources are shown to be 100% correct. A lot of the time they have, here's the caveats, getting these out of the way first. A lot of the time they have sidestepped big questions, like, for example, when we had what did Daemon actually say, what orders did Daemon actually give as to what do you do if you don't find Aemond, that kind of thing. They also sidestepped what kind of toast did he give to the prince for a day, or heir for a day, way back in the beginning of season 1. They have sometimes sidestepped these issues. Mushroom, some of the things that Mushroom said have been quite close, it has to be said. Daemon taking Rhaenyra down into the brothels and darker areas of Flea Bottom, that's a Mushroom story. That's, it's salacious. It's that's definitely from him. But at the same time, they completely ignored he had a whole load of fantastic stories about what happened up in Winterfell that they just blanked. Sarah Snow, no. Vermax laying eggs, no. A lot of these things are not there. So very broadly speaking, and maybe I'll do a fuller analysis of this at some point. I find it quite a fascinating subject. Very broadly speaking, in House of the Dragon, they've not gone for the route of one of these people. And for those who've not read Fire and Blood, there are 3 main sources, in-world sources, that are used for the in-world history of Fire and Blood for the period of the Dance of the Dragons. They've not gone down the route of saying one of them is correct and the others are not correct. They've sort of picked and chosen, and sometimes they've gone in completely different routes that aren't suggested anywhere. So, like the Laenor thing, nowhere does it say, oh, actually, he might have survived. It's just like no, who did it? It might have been Daemon. It might have been whatever. So that's the route that they've gone down. Is sometimes completely different, sometimes from each of the different ones, but keeping the overall narrative and intentions arc from Gildayn himself, the person who pulled Fire and Blood together. Ejovi saying, what are your thoughts about the theory suggesting that Larys is a skin changer and walks into rats to spy on the Red Keep? Well, where's Joe Magician when you need him? This is Joe Magician's theory. I don't know if I've seen all of his justification for this. Now, Larys being a skin changer, walking into rats to spy on the Red Keep. Where does this come from? Now, some of this is the fact that rats were very, very strongly shown on House of the Dragon season 1. They would 3 or 4 episodes. You just like the camera would just move to a rat and we'd see it for 2 or 3 seconds on a shelf or somewhere like that. Once it was lapping up the blood after that rather horrific wedding feast. So why did they do that? A directorial choice, really, but also a very long setup for Blood and Cheese, in which the fact that there are a lot of rats in the Red Keep is an important plot point. You need to have rat catchers because there are so many rats. Larys himself was on he was seen as somebody who was watching and listening. When he spoke to Alicent once, he was speaking, and you just saw the face. The weirwood tree was there in between them. The imagery was particularly strong. He is now the Lord of Harrenhal. We'll be seeing Harrenhal very soon on the show. Damon's going to be going there. Other people will be going there afterwards. And Harrenhal is obviously right next to. It has a big weirwood tree itself. It's partly built using timbers from weirwood trees, and it is right by the God's Eye Lake, where we have the Isle of Faces. So there is a lot of sort of old godsy background imagery there for House Strong. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible, but I don't think. I mean, certainly in the book, we don't get hints of that. On the TV show, yes, you can do this, but I don't think they've really pursued that route. I think the interesting thing will be what they do with this when we get up to Harrenhal, because if they are going to be introducing a more old gods weirwood elements to this, that is where they're going to be doing it. It's going to the weirwood tree is even mentioned there. Daemon at one point, when he's waiting for Aemon to turn up, he slashes at the weirwood tree every day while he's waiting. So we know that it's going to be there. We've even seen George R. Martin on his blog had a picture taken by what looks like the weirwood tree there. So there's a lot of possibility for it, but at the moment I don't think we've got any full evidence. But do go and check out Joe Magician, who's got some excellent videos on it. I am sure his videos are always well worth a look. Let's go and yeah, Carl Karsnark, as you say, he's been doing House Strong videos for a long time, so this isn't a new thing for him. Mr. Worldwide saying, hi, Robert. I hope you're staying cool through these hot summer days. Yes, it's there's been a mini heat wave in the UK. This is our week of summer this year. I'm sure next week it will be back to normal cool weather. From what I remember, the Battle of the Gullet happens pretty quickly after the Dragon Seeds in the book. However, I don't think we've seen much of the inciting events, Otto writing letters to Essos, etc. I feel confident they'll do it because they did the Stepstone stuff in season 1, and there was the foreshadowing of Jacaerys dying by quarrel in episode 2. But I have a gut feeling it'll be quite different. From what you've seen, how do you think that battle will play out on screen compared to books compared to the books. Yes, so the Battle of the Gullet is a significant battle. In the books, what happens? So Otto writes off trying to get help from lots of different quarters. One of the places he writes off to is the Triarchy. Three free cities. We've already seen them. They were largely supporting the war in the Stepstones that Daemon and Corlys were fighting for a very long time. So will they do it? Yes, I'm pretty sure they will do it. It is very significant in terms of character development and character losses. So it will definitely happen. I think the first thing I would say is timing. We've not seen, and this doesn't mean it's not happening this season, but we've not seen in any of the trailers anything that looks remotely like a big sea battle. So it's possible it won't be this season. But if they do push it back, I would imagine it'd be quite early in the next season. The big thing is when the Dragon Seeds happens. We've only got 8 episodes this season. We're already 2 in. We've seen that at least one of the Dragon Seeds is not even in the right place to be doing this. So don't expect the Dragon Seeds to happen until the second half of the season, I would have thought. So the space for doing it in the second half of the season is already quite limited. So if I had to guess, I would say that's probably going to be episode 1 or 2 of next season, which means that they might shift it in time a little bit from where it was before the taking of King's Landing to after. It doesn't have to be at that point in the timeline. There's no specific reason why that they couldn't have it as slightly shifted. And how might it change? Well, if they have shifted it a bit, they might change some of the personnel. They might change where people are going. But I think just from the feel we've got so far, probably the biggest thing is that we read about the Battle of the Gullet very much as this is a Targaryen / dragon thing. The Triarchy fleet arrives, it's doing damage. It captures a boat with some Targaryens in. The Dragon Seeds ride to the rescue. Big fight happens. Lots of dramatic consequences. That's the kind of the take we have. Given the fact that we have now got 2 Velaryons, they're from Hull. I'm going to call them Velaryons because they later get given the name Velaryon, Adam and Alyn. And we know that Adam is going to be a dragon rider. Alyn, we're told, is a sailor. I suspect they're not going to be able to resist the idea of us seeing Alyn, who is not going to be a dragon rider, though he should try, in a ship while his brother is overhead on a dragon. And they're 2 different paths. So if I were to say what kind of, from a dramatic perspective, what would work in terms of how they want to show it, is not just let's look at these dragon riders swooping in. It's from the perspective of the ships as well, and in particular Alyn, and him seeing that could have been me. Question from George, saying, thanks again for your content and look forward to more. Thank you very much. Another universe for your consideration is Dune. If only we had an axolotl tank to clone you. Well, yeah, if I, in my unguarded moments, I sort of do speculate on where I might expand out to after this. At the moment, for those who don't know, on my channel, I cover A Song of Ice and Fire, I cover Lord of the Rings, and I do a bit of The Witcher. Expect, for the next few months, well, we've got House of the Dragon, Rings of Power, expect Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings content to predominate. But at the end of the year, we got a new Witcher book coming out, so definitely there will be some more Witcher content. But sometimes I do wonder where I might expand next. The two, feel free to drop into the chat, or if you're watching this back a bit later on YouTube, drop in the comments your thoughts on this. But the two things I tend to get asked about the most, both of which, yeah, I could see myself doing at some point. Wheel of Time and Dune. I love both. I think they're fantastic, and could happily get into them. So yeah, I've considered it. Let's put it that way. Um, The Westerosi Ninja saying we're headed to a finale of Rhaenyra taking King's Landing after the penultimate episode showing Rook's Rest and the death of a certain girl boss. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly whether I said at the beginning of, and I said in fact I said this at the very beginning of season one, where if I were in charge, I would end season two with the taking of King's Landing. That just works for me as an arc from the start of season two. Team Green are seemingly in a very strong position in King's Landing with their person on the Iron Throne, etc., etc., to reach to and Team Black have been just they don't seem to have any allies yet. They've already lost one of their people and a dragon. They seem to be on the way down. This would create an overall arc for season two, which would work really well for me, ending with the taking of King's Landing. So that might work. I do wonder now whether what I saw them do. I mean, this is pure theorizing. I've got no inside knowledge on this at all. But what I saw them do with the Cargill twins was take characters who they've been around, but they haven't been ones that we've really bought into. And they turned that into a really emotionally impactful ending for those characters, which did make me wonder whether we might have, as an ending to this season, or perhaps a penultimate for this season, an ending of another character. If we don't have the Battle of the Gullet until next season, I do wonder whether it might be Criston Cole. He does have a look at it. I recently did a video actually on Criston Cole in the books. If you're interested, he's got quite a dramatic and interesting ending. That whether they keep the exact same cast or whether they of characters who are there, whether they give the job of ending Criston Cole to other people, I don't know, but Criston Cole has been quite significant in this season, and will be even more significant as the season progresses. So that would hugely shift things. It's just a theory, but that might be where they go with it. And Rook's Rest, again, I don't know, but my instinct, given the pace that they seem to be going at, is that will be earlier than the very end of the season. Christy Moniz underneath saying yippee, thank you very much. Hugely appreciate that. Emma S, do you think Rhaenyra would ever tell Aegon's prophecy to Aegon and the Greens? Oh, interesting. I mean, instinctively, she thinks that this is something which should be passed down from ruler to their heir. So we should definitely see her pass this down to Jace at some point. But one tweak to her character that we see here on the show is the fact that she seems very focused on this idea that it has to be a united kingdom. It can't just be, she can't just go out and kill half her family. She has to be ruling over a united, strong Seven Kingdoms. And that is part of the reason that she is a bit more reluctant to head straight into a war. She is holding back. It's a deliberate thing. She's there. She's got people around her, Daemon in particular, but also some of the other advisors who are there saying, "Go on, we can attack. We can try and take out King's Landing. We can go take the Riverlands," and she's always just holding back. And that's quite an interesting, as I say, an interesting little uh, added element to her character. Um, because it does add in this idea that what if at the very end, and she thought this is going to die with me. If she honestly thinks that this is the most important prophecy in the entire world, yeah, maybe she would. If she's about to be killed, if she thinks that her son, who she's got there, is too young to understand it, and this has to be passed on to someone, and the only other person that she knew who knew anything about it, was Daemon, who's dead. She told Jace, but Jace died. Well, this whole list, if she thinks she's the only person left with this, maybe she would. I don't know. It's a really interesting question. In the normal course of events, no, but in those specific circumstances, um, possibly. Martin S. saying, "Hi, Robert. Do you have any favourite Wheel of Time characters?" I do. Tom Merrilin is my favourite Wheel of Time character. I wouldn't say they've done him dirty on the TV show, but he's appeared less than I was hoping. He's been in a couple of episodes, but he's pretty good. And I think Matt, out of the sort of the main cast, Matt always kind of worked for me as a fun but tortured soul. Andrew Case saying the funeral procession was incredibly well done. The emotion, discomfort, and propaganda. Also, the juxtaposition of Rhaenyra watching over her similarly young children during that sequence. Yes, and in the inside the episode, the thing that they did, which if you've not come across them, I'm sure they're on HBO or wherever it is you watch the show, but they're also on the Game of Thrones YouTube channel. They do a couple actually. They would do a sort of, I think they call it Inside the Episode, and another one called something like Making the Episode. It's not exactly that, but something like that. And they're quite short. The ones, for example, the ones for episode 2 were, I think, 8 and 20 minutes respectively long, and they're really quite interesting. And one of the things that they showed there with that funeral procession that they were trying to do was they deliberately had the guy with the drum, which I thought worked really well. And they were wanting that also to match, yes, the Rhaenyra thing with her children, but also to match Aegon, who wasn't on the procession. He was there with blood, and he got this big mace or whatever it was in his hand. And as you get the boom of the drum, and he's meting out the punishment that he wants to mete out. So that's another kind of layer to what they were trying to show on that one. No Diggity saying, "Who else thought that little Jaehaerys's head was going to fall off when the hearse ran into that pothole during the funeral procession?" Yeah, I did too. I can remember thinking, "Oh no!" So yeah, it's. I mean, I don't. You're not alone. I think probably the majority of people, the thought crossed their mind. Okay, let's go to a question from Maura Lee. Hi, Maura. If you're out there, you normally pop in at some point for these live streams, saying, "In the beginning of the first season, the king," well, actually, this is about the prophecy, which we were talking about a moment ago. "The king made it of importance to talk to his daughter about the prophecy, and it was one of my favourite scenes in the show. I haven't seen any more discussion about the prophecy, nor do we know if Queen Rhaenyra has even tried talking to her heir about it. I'm curious now what the role of the prophecy will be in future episodes and seasons, and how it will tie into the end game with the others, especially in the books. Do you think we will see more scenes with House Stark, or do you think we'll have to wait to see them again during the Hour of the Wolf at the end of the TV series?" Well, let me just quickly pick off House Stark. So I think we can now reasonably confidently say that we're not going to see Winterfell again. We're not going to see Cregan Stark again this season. That was that cold open, pun intended, up in the north. That was a one-off. That was what we're going to see. But there were actually two in the book. There were two forces that came down from the north, and it was interesting that they talked about sending down 2,000 men, because that was the first. They were called the Winter Wolves. They got sent down. They were led by Roderick Dustin, Roddy the Ruin. They came down south. They actually got involved. They House Dustin is quite is at the south of the north, and some Mandleys joined in as well near the south of the north. So they joined the battle in the Riverlands relatively early, and these were 2,000 old, experienced fighters who were not expecting to survive the winter in the north. So they're heading to the south, expecting to die. Basically, they've already counted themselves dead. They've said goodbye to their loved ones. They've gone to the south, and they play a hugely important role in the battles that happen in the Riverlands. Now, we probably should see them appear at some point in the season, probably in the second half of the season. We will get the 2,000 Winter Wolves. The second installment comes after Rhaenyra. I think it's after Rhaenyra has to quit King's Landing, and then it's Cregan's like, "Oh, okay, I'll send some more guys down. We'll sort this out." Clearly, this war is not going to be going as straightforwardly as we thought. That's when we get Cregan heading down south and ending up with the Hour of the Wolf. So we will probably see a bit more of the Northern Army this season. Definitely we'll see a lot more in a later season, but no more Cregan. As for the prophecy, Aegon's prophecy, the Song of Ice and Fire. Now, I think we will see her tell Jacaerys, and we will, through the rest of this should be a theme going through this, is that when another heir dies, she has to tell the next in line, who's getting younger and less able to take it on board. And this should be an extra element of stress and strain to her, is that she is the person holding on to this. And there's no one else that she can share it with. And what if she dies? As a complete aside, this wasn't the question you asked, but this struck me just as I was preparing for this live stream. You get in Dragonstone, and we've seen Rhaenyra grabbing a scroll, a book, looking at some stories there of Targaryen history. If in the inside the episode, and they explain this, and they say, here's all of these bits of Targaryen knowledge and history and lore from Valyria, etc. In Dragonstone. The question is, does that survive the Dance of the Dragons? We've already seen Aegon clearly no care for Valyria and Targaryen history, smashing up his dad's model, which is, and incidentally, I retweeted it out. Paddy Considine, who played Viserys, did a very amusing Instagram post about how sad he was that it took him ages to build that Lego model. But Aegon smashing up, figuratively, Valyrian history. When Aegon takes control of Dragonstone, what's his attitude going to be to all of the stuff that's there? Is that going to go as well? He clearly has no personal interest in any of this stuff at all. But as I say, that's a complete by the by. But they've created that as a massive set and drawn attention to it. it does feel to me a little bit like a Chekhov's Library of Alexandria, if that makes sense. So the role of the prophecy, it should be something that is increasingly becoming an issue of stress for Rhaenyra, and us as viewers, we should be starting to wonder, how is this going to get passed down? Is this going to get lost here? Is a question that we've debated quite a lot on these live streams, is at which point in Targaryen history. Dany clearly doesn't know about this. Dany hasn't got an idea about what this is. So clearly at some point between Rhaenyra and Daenerys, that got lost. And the favourite place for where this might have happened is in the Dance of the Dragons. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that. Kelly Summers saying, I think you mentioned that the Red Keep had over 100 rat catchers that Aegon had hanged. How were there so many rats still? Hashtag Larys the Rat. Yes, there was. There were 100 in the book. There were. Aegon ordered the deaths of 100 rat catchers. Now, were there actually 100, or is that just a sort of a round number remembered by history? It was certainly a lot. How could there possibly still be that many rats? Well, it's a big place, the Red Keep. It's a big old place, and there's lots of hidey holes and routes that the rats can take between rooms. There's a lot going on there, so it's not a surprise. The interesting thing that the book clarifies, I don't think they did it on the show, was that after the death of the 100 rat catchers, Otto Hightower, always the coolest head in the room, goes, right, let's buy 100 cats. So that I did. There's a video I did with History of Westeros, which Aziz did quite a lot of the thinking on this one, but I think it's excellent. We can look at a lot of the history of what happened to the Targaryens and on into A Song of Ice and Fire, with these decisions about whether there's rat catchers, whether there's cats. If you just taking it all the way up to the end, the cats that we've got in the Red Keep, we're told that the Red Keep is crawling with cats. They're all over the place. And Arya chases them around the Red Keep. The cats are a significant part in the plot all the way through to there. And Balerion the Black Cat is, I think, going to be a significant part of the plot going forward as well. Christina B saying, episode 2 had so many incredibly acted one-on-one scenes. Rhaenyra and Daemon, Otto and Aegon, Rhaenyra and Mysaria, etc. What other pairings would you most like to see share a scene together? Oh, interesting. Well, the coming together of Alicent and Rhaenyra again will be absolutely fascinating. I would love to see Otto and Daemon. This is, in the book, marked down as one of the main causes of splits, is the fact that Otto Hightower hated Daemon, and they kind of nodded towards it in season 1. Daemon clearly enjoyed annoying Otto, and Otto was clearly there trying to make sure that Daemon was nowhere near power, but they didn't really follow that through to its sort of full conclusion. But those two together, and I think that they would act it out brilliantly. I think Rhys Ifans, by the way, is a fantastic actor, and I'm glad he got the opportunity. Episode 2 was for me, that was his episode. He was his main big things are happening there. Maybe they'll give him a few more things in future episodes, give him some stuff which other people did. That would not surprise me. But in the book, that's almost it now for him. He's got sidelined, and other people are leading Team Green from this moment. So I think that was his high water point. The other pairing that at some point is going to be Aemond and Daemon. They've been setting this one up rightly because it's obviously in the book, but they've been setting this one up for a while now. Just one other kind of nod, I think, that I would just say is I think Rhaenys, Eve Best, I think she's done really well. I think the scenes between her and Corlys show this huge gulf in kind of maturity with the conversations that other people and other couples have on the show. It's clearly not a perfect relationship by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a mature one, and it's one where they clearly respect each other, and they're trying to work things out between the two of them. So I've loved those. I've also loved the brief moments she has with Matt Smith as Daemon, where she understands him better than almost anyone else at times. And that I particularly loved that bit when everyone's there and the Black Council just sort of saying, well, this is what's happened. How on earth, says Rhaenyra, how on earth would people think that I would order his murder, etc., etc.? And then Rhaenys just kind of stares at Daemon, and he's just like looks back at her, and yep, she knows. She knows. Nobody else seems to have figured it out yet, but she knows. Let's go to Maura Lee, you are there. Sorry, I was answered your question a moment ago. I didn't know whether you were in the chat or if you were watching. Just saying a show of love and support. You are the best. Thank you. I hugely appreciate that, and your ongoing support over many years, actually, Maura. Thank you so much. Let's go to a question from Michelle Raimo saying, blind items abound about Bloodraven, Bittersteel, and Shira Seastar are being cast for Duncan Egg. Blackfire Rebellion flashbacks. I mean, I don't know about that in terms of Duncan Egg. So, just to quickly digress over into Duncan Egg, they've started shooting Duncan Egg season 1 now. It's going to be a shorter season. I think actually, Maura Lee, you had a question about Duncan Egg. I'll wrap that up in this one. So it's still going under the title of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. It's going to be 6 episodes. We've had 1 season confirmed. Clearly, the idea is that we've got 2 more stories, and they would love to go on and do those other 2 stories as well. George R. Martin has said what you'd expect him to say, which is that by the time they would get that far, he would hope he's written a few more. But obviously, we know his track record. So that's the situation there. I don't think they will particularly want to overtake him on this one. So I think that we will just be getting whatever he's written rather than completely new made up stories. Now, we've had casting. We've seen a screenshot of Dunk, who I think looks perfectly cast. And we've seen Egg. They also announced 5 or 6 other castings with significant characters for book 1, for story 1, like Tansel Too Tall, like Prince Aerion, like Baelor, people like that. So we've got quite a few good characters already cast. People like Aegor Rivers and Bloodraven, Shira Seastar do not appear in book 1. So they shouldn't be here. Now, might they do some flashbacks to something like the Blackfire Run? I mean, they might do, but I don't think there's a need to at this point, because that's not. So the Blackfire Rebellions are a significant for stories 2 and 3. The Sworn Sword and the Mystery Knight. That's an important bit of information you need to understand about the Blackfire Rebellion in order to understand those stories. For book 1, you don't. For book 1, it is really quite simple and straightforward. This is Dunk entering a tourney. And then doing dunk things. So that's all you really need to know. You don't need to understand, as long as you get, oh, here's some Targaryens, and we can see who the good Targaryens are, we can see who the bad Targaryens are. That's all you need to know. So it would be lovely. It would be lovely to get a first image of particularly Bloodraven on screen, but I don't think it's needed for this. And the question. So Andrew K saying, agreed, this season Rhaenys finally feels adjacent to her textual counterpart. She does and she doesn't. So Rhaenys, people haven't asked many questions about Rhaenys. That will probably come later in the season. But I have done a video on her, which I'll be releasing when I think interest in her is going to be at its height during this season. I've pre-done a few videos, forward planning. So what I noticed in that is that her character has been drawn different at this stage in her life. Her character has been drawn differently on the show to in the book. Now, I love the way that they've shown the character in the show. I think that her being this kind of slightly world-weary, quite wise, but still incredibly strong character that you don't want to get on the wrong side of, has worked really well. In the book, she is the person who is wanting to immediately get on the dragons and go and attack King's Landing. She has to be sort of persuaded not to be doing this. She is proactively pushing the war. In fact, she's the first person to say that they're already in a war. Unlike the Rhaenys that we see here, who is, it's not my place to start a war. So they are different. The spirit of the character is the same, but where she is in her character journey is different. I think I had another question. Yeah, username redacted, saying tinfoil-ish. Are the rats scurrying around Maegor's tunnels during Blood and Cheese evidence against Larys Strong being a warg, who theoretically might have been using the rats to spy on the Red Keep? Interesting one. I think the question is, if he was using the rats to spy on the Red Keep, should that not have meant that he knew what was going on with Blood and Cheese, or did it all just happen too quickly for him? That would be the question that I would have going on there. Is the fact that there were lots during Blood and Cheese that makes it evidence against him being a warg? I don't think so. I don't think, in all honesty, that I've seen strong evidence one way or the other on him being a warg. He definitely seems to know a lot of stuff, but we're given reasons why he would know it. That there's no suggestion that he has to be a warg. Let's go to a question. In fact, just very briefly, if you're here in the chat and you're enjoying the chat, some excellent people, could you just show a little bit of love to the moderators? They do a fantastic job. Just tell them how great they are, because they absolutely deserve it. And just a personal thanks from me, not just to the moderators, but also to my patrons. I try and do this every live stream just to let them know I appreciate them. I can't do what I do without your support, patrons, so thank you. And if you do want to support this channel, the best way to do it is through Patreon. There is a link down in the description somewhere. Okay, thank yous done. Let's go to a question from Alhad. I have two questions. What will be the implications of Alicent and Criston's relationship in the show? Will anyone apart from Larys, Otto, and Helena know about it? So this is a tricky one. So my instinct, because this is new, this isn't in the book, this is a different thing. My instinct is that we've already seen the most significant implications of that relationship, and I mean, even calling it a relationship, I think, is probably stretching the term quite a long way. Um, they, uh, the fact that he was not on guard, he was with her, has a huge impact. Uh, could he have saved baby Jaehaerys? Quite possibly. We don't know. But psychologically, what seems to have happened is that it's led to both him and Alicent feeling guilty for what happened. She is now seeking some kind of absolution. Certainly, she wants to um, get forgiveness in some way for what she's done. But you get Criston Cole, who is now, he says, there is no absolution for what I've done. So he's now just in a I just want to win mode. That seems to be where he's at. The sending Arik was, yeah, partly an idea. Maybe he could end the war there and then by killing Rhaenyra, but also it was very clearly this was who can I blame? He thinks that people are going to start blaming him. People have started asking, where was he? He can transfer that by saying Arik should have been there. Arik should have helped out. And I said this in my breakdown video, but I think it's really symbolically really important. He tries to provoke Arik first of all, talking about his cloak, and that is the symbolism there. It was pretty obvious, but Arik had a dirty cloak because he was doing his duty, and Criston Cole had a nice, bright, white, clean cloak because he wasn't doing his duty. He wasn't out there in the mud doing what he should have been doing. But when that didn't work, when Arik failed to rise to the bait there, he said, okay, fine, I will stop eating and I'll go and immediately change my cloak. That's the point at which Criston Cole tried to rile him even further, suggesting that he should have been doing more. He should have been protecting it. Now, as Lord Commander, newish Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Criston Cole was in charge of deciding where people should be stationed. Now, he had been Alicent's sworn shield, so he should therefore, so him being protecting her, fine, but he obviously should have been outside the door. And there is a question of when she's no longer the queen, when she's now the dowager queen, there's a new queen. Helena is the queen of the land. She had nobody outside her door. Now, whose responsibility was it? Fundamentally, it had to be Criston Cole's responsibility to be, uh, if not himself stationed there, then having someone else within the Kingsguard stationed there. So I think that the implications are largely done, and it has to be said that Criston Cole is not going to be in King's Landing for very much longer. He's going to head out on one expedition, then come back, and then head out pretty soon afterwards on another one. So we actually probably only have 2 or 3 more episodes of Alicent and Criston Cole, which some people will probably find very much of a relief. But I don't think there's very far for the relationship to go after this. Maybe there will be something which will add a degree of pathos to where his end is. I don't know, but I don't. It's not a thing which is going to carry on beyond this season. Michelle Ramos saying this is about Bloodraven potentially being cast. I agree, but if my heart didn't soar when I saw that, I would love to see Bloodraven as fast as possible. Yeah, you and me both would be fantastic. Let's go to Reflective Rambling. Hi there, Reflective Rambling. Good to see you. Raise his hand as one relieved. Yeah, I can't possibly say how many times we might see the two of them together, but I don't think this is going to carry on beyond the season unless they're really shifting things around. And Al, had your second question related to that was, do you think that Alicent will actually find out that Viserys was talking about the prince that was promised, prophecy, and not about Aegon the Second? The Otto Aegon scene confirmed that nobody actually cares about what Viserys said in that last moment, but it would be important for Alicent. Yeah, I think that's the key point here, is that at this stage, it's nobody really cares. They've moved beyond the justifications for the start of the war. We're now fully in war. So if she finds out this is purely about how this impacts on her and her personal journey. So if she finds out, then it will probably just add to the guilt, to be honest. How she'd find out is a completely different matter. Maura Lee saying, in Fire and Blood, we will see many important battle scenes that will involve our major characters. I'm thinking about the Civil War in the Riverlands, the Battle of Rook's Rest, the Battle above the God's Eye, to name a few. How do you think these important battles will be spaced out over the 4 seasons until we get to the end of the series and the Hour of the Wolf? Okay, interesting question. So, there will... The Battle of Rook's Rest has to happen this season. And we've already talked about the Battle of the Gullet, which will be either the end of the season or the beginning of next. There are lots of battles in the Riverlands. Now, whether they show all of these is, I think, open to debate, because quite a lot of them happen almost off camera in Fire and Blood. So the Lannister forces head east, run into some opposition, big battle. Yeah. Do we need to see that battle, or do we just need to hear about it? Probably we just need to hear about it. Similarly, there's lots of little battles in the Riverlands between the Brackens and the Blackwoods. And quite a few smaller scuffles, it has to be said, down in the Reach. And we've already had hints at this, that the Reach is not united. The High Towers are not Lords Paramount of the Reach, so as powerful as they are, they're not the people that you have to actually make sure that you're following. If you're in the Reach, you have to make sure that you're following the Lords Paramount, which is House Tyrell. So they're the people that you should be paying attention to. And if they're not giving a strong steer, then some of the other big houses might be arming and ahhing a little bit. So there's a lot of battles. My general take is that we will get the Butcher's Ball probably at the end of this season. Then next season we're going to start seeing the march of the Hightower army with Prince Deeren and Tesserion, his dragon, across, heading towards King's Landing, which means we're going to be having battles of Tumbleton, which are horrors of warfare. So that, I think, will be something which will be probably happening next season. In terms of other battles, I think possibly one of the ending of season 3, or maybe the penultimate episode of season 3, the battle above the God's Eye Lake, the Daemon and Aemond battle. That has to be the center point of an episode. So that might be a penultimate episode of the season thing. So yeah, the question I think we will have an answer to in a few episodes' time is, how fast are they rattling through this story? Are they going to try and put this into 4 or 5 seasons? I know some people were concerned about the fact that we went down from 10 episodes to 8 episodes for season 2. The episodes are longer. I don't know whether you noticed, episode 1 was over an hour long. Episode 2 was 70 something minutes long. Episode 3 is also going to be over 70 minutes long. So these are long episodes. So I don't think we're actually losing out huge amounts of screen time by going down to 8 episodes. if it carries on being as massive a hit as it is at the moment, you could certainly see that HBO will want to extend it out as far as they can. So maybe they might see, is there a possibility of making 5 seasons out of this? Yeah, they could definitely do that. In which case the battles will be more spaced out. Madeline Tyrell-Dayne saying, "Hi Robert, I hope you're well. I'm wondering if you can share your opinion or analysis of what Helena experienced during the funeral procession. Do you think it was grief, overstimulation, anxiety, or that she was experiencing some kind of visions or prophecy during the procession?" I briefly touched on this earlier, but what the inside the episode said, I can't remember whether it was the showrunner or the director, someone referred to Helena having a panic attack. So that is what this official line is of what was going on there. We didn't hear her say anything that sounded particularly prophetic. She didn't seem to be staring off into the distance as if she was seeing some kind of vision. So I don't think that that was going on. I think she was literally, in their words, having a panic attack. She didn't want to be there. She was not in control of her surroundings, and she was, as I said earlier, she is being, in our language, autism coded, and so at that point, that might just be too much for her. So that was basically what was going on. Corvus saying, "Greetings, Robert. This will be my first live stream in your time zone." Well, welcome to my time zone. I bought into the show hype that Helena's children were more likely Aemons, but no confirmation after Blood and Cheese. Do you think there is still room in the show canon for this? Yeah, for those who missed this, this is something. I mean, it did exist. I've seen a couple of random Reddit posts from Blood, where people did speculate maybe that Helena's children could be Aemons rather than Aegons. But it really, as a theory, caught hold after season 1 of House of the Dragon, where there are a few bits where Aegon clearly wasn't that interested in Helena. Aemond, first of all, we had that episode, the bottle episode, where we had Lena's funeral, and they were all just in that little kind of terraced area. And one of the exchanges there was Aegon basically saying, "Helena's weird, I don't want to marry her." And Aemond saying, "Well, if Mother had asked me to, I'd marry her." And then we get a few other moments where you get Rhaenys coming up on Melis up through the floor of the dragon pit. Aemond noticeably stood in front of Helena in a kind of, you could say, protective way. And so people wondered. He danced with her at that happy family meal that Viserys held. So there were some people who speculated on this idea. My take is probably no, because we've had no real supportive evidence in the show. I mean, as I say, in the book, I don't think there's much we can go on there. In the show, when Jaehaerys died, did we see Aemond feeling really sad, confessing to his lover down in Flea Bottom? "Oh, actually, I think that might be my son who died." No, we don't get any of that. So I think you would expect that. And we also get a moment between Aegon and Helena when they kind of pass in the corridor and they kind of stare at each other. Now, I can remember when I watched that, I thought, "Oh, that's just him being a bit cold. Maybe he should say something to her." Um, but in the inside the episode, they basically said, I think it was actually the actor himself, Tom, I will remember his full name at some point, Tom double barrel surname. He said, actually, the only person that he knows in all of the Red Keep who understands the pain that he's going through is Helena. So clearly, this isn't a thing which the actors themselves have been told. There's no evidence from the characters that this is there. So I think we can probably say on the show, I mean, they could change it at some point, but it doesn't seem likely anymore. Reflective rambling, picking up a question for Old School 3000 LOE Mark. Thank you. I love it when people pick up questions for others, saying, could Bale the Bard be retconned as a secret Targ to tie in the Ice and Fire prophecy to reflect Arya being the promised prince? Okay, so this is quite a deep cut. So Bale the Bard, legendary figure in House Stark history, who was a bard who came and performed in Winterfell, and he basically kidnapped the only daughter of Lord Stark and went down into the Winterfell crypts, and they stayed there until she'd had a baby who then came up, and that baby grew up to inherit, and as is the way of these kinds of stories, that grew up and actually killed Bale the Bard. So that's the headline story. There's a lot of coding. He left a blue rose there on the bed where he'd taken her from. Blue roses obviously are Lyanna's favourite flower, and Arya has got a lot of Lyanna coding to her as well. So there's lots of links and lines that you can draw between all of these different things. Could Bale the Bard be retconned to a secret Targ? I don't think so, and I don't think this is a significant enough story for it to take on that extra layer from being changed and it mean a huge amount, if that makes sense. There are some legends and stories that you go, okay, so that is quite important. The Last Hero, Azor Ahai, things like that. The Tale of Bale the Bard, yeah, it's a good tale, and it clearly has some foreshadowing elements for A Song of Ice and Fire, but I don't think it's got enough to it to sort of hold the weight of shifting everything to put something like Arya being the promised prince. Let's go to a question from Raven's Oath saying, good evening, Robert, and to you too. Hope you and Dan the dog are well. We are, thank you. There's not much information about House Cargill. I'm not sure we're given castle or keep names beyond that they're from the Crown Lands. What do we know of their history? Is House Cargill an extinct house by the time of Robert's Rebellion? Thank you. Yeah, so I was digging into this. They are marked down as an extinct house. I couldn't find, in all honesty, I couldn't find a reference to say that's the case. I'm sure it is there somewhere. I couldn't actually find a particular reference. Of vague interest, if you, as we're talking about Duncan Egg, in the story that's being filmed right now, the Duncan Egg story, then Dunk does spot their sigil. So there is someone from House Cargill later who is at that tourney. So they didn't die out with the deaths of Eric and Eric. They survived quite a few decades after that. But when between that and the present day of A Song of Ice and Fire, we don't know, sadly. They're not a large house, let's put it that way. Diego Godoy saying, Hola, Robert. Hola. Do you think we'll see Helena riding her dragon at all in House of the Dragon? I think it's a lovely idea. I'd love to see her ride her dragon. But she doesn't in the book. I mean, she probably did at some point, but we don't see her going into combat or anything like that in the book. In fact, in the book, from now on, largely she's broken by grief and kind of recedes back into the background. And until another tragedy befalls, of course, poor Helena. But So in the book, no. On the show, they've obviously given her a lot more screen time, as it were, compared to the amount of page time that she had in the book. Would she ride a dragon? It's hard to see how she would or why she would. Uh, is there a particular reason for her to do that? Is she going to go in and fight people on Dragonback? That doesn't really feel like her, the character that we have. Is it that she wishes to go out and explore the world? Again, that doesn't seem to be. She seems to only want to be with the people that she knows and the environment that she knows and understands. And so that doesn't seem likely for escape, maybe. So I mean, I'm not going to put it beyond the production team to find a way for her to be on her dragon. And her dragon, incidentally, is called Dreamfire, which also maps into her kind of like Dragon Dreamer world. And it'll be interesting to see if we do get some more about the link between the two of them and whether that affects the Dragon Dreams. But we have to have a reason for her to do it. And at the moment, there isn't one. That Alf Torren saying, just to pick up on the Helena thing, as an autistic person, I have never related harder to a character on screen than I do with Helena. Even though I am 100% Team Black, she's my fave. Yeah, I know a lot of people who have said very similar, autistic people who have said very similar things. So um, they obviously don't, in that world, they don't have terms like autism and things like that. But as a character, I think it's one of those things that if we interpret her as being autistic but just undiagnosed for obvious reasons, then that I think the showrunners would be okay with that. Um, there's an alarm going off behind me. Can you hear that? Hopefully it'll finish soon. Um, let's go to a question from um, Gina Z saying, Hi Robert, seeing Aemond in the arms of the brothel madam in episode 2 of House of the Dragon was probably a foreshadowing of his relationship with Alice Rivers, but it was also interesting that the madam mentioned the fact that the small folk suffer when princes get angry. Is this another piece of foreshadowing the small folk uprising later on? And do you think this will have any impact on Aemond's decision making going forward? I suspect not. Okay, well, this is, I think, one of the most important things which is starting to come out from the show. For that episode, it was very noticeable that they are then juxtaposing this with Daemon, who seems to have quite a cold anger going on, occasionally hot, but quite a cold anger. And when he gets angry, the small folk will almost certainly suffer. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But in this episode, this was a theme. This came up again and again and again. Yes, we have it here when we have Aemond's lover specifically talking about this. We have Hugh Hammer there talking about he's been promised some things by the king, and but it's not been forthcoming. So that's an issue. We've also got the whole propaganda procession, the funeral procession, which was there to try and get the small folk on side, and then that was completely undone by what Aegon did with the rat catchers. Who suffers there? The small folk. The 100 rat catchers. How many friends and family would they have? It's the small folk who suffer. Even Helena is very much that I don't want the small. She doesn't say the small folk. I don't want anyone else to be closer to me. Yeah, so this is a theme which was resounding through that, and is going to keep on picking up through uh, probably to I don't know the end of next season or something along those lines. When we get the storming of the Dragon Pit. and the people have had enough. At this point, they've already had, and this is happening drip, drip, drip. It's slowly being pointed out to us, but this is just going to grow. Is that we had Rhaenys bursting up through the floor of the dragon pit. The 1% were fine. She didn't kill anyone. Nobody, even she, doesn't seem to acknowledge the fact that probably dozens of small folk were killed just by having a dragon bursting onto the scene. And then we have the blockade, which we're basically being told this is causing some food shortages. Are we seeing food shortages in the Red Keep? Nope, not at all. We are who's suffering? The small folk. The rat catchers. This is, and we're told that the small folk are now hating on Rhaenyra the cruel, Rhaenyra the heartless, and then we're told that, or we're shown with the rat catchers, they're now thinking that Aegon is heartless. So this is an ongoing thing. We're going to get drip, drip, drip. The small folk are suffering, and the small folk are going to start getting angry about this, and we will see this happen over the course of the next season or two. Let's just having a quick flick through. Reflective rambling, talking about Helena. The fact that they don't have terms in this world but can still represent traits is an even more inclusive writing form, in my opinion. A nod to existing beyond what a time society recommend. Yeah, here. Absolutely agree with that. And John Buxton has been a member for 5 months, saying, "Hi, Robert. Any thoughts on how the showrunners may portray Roddy the Ruin, along with any changes they may bring to his character or arc when bringing his character arc to screen?" So I don't know. I don't actually have to admit I've missed out on whether or not they did a casting announcement for him. Yeah, so someone in the chat. There's always someone in the chat who knows these things. If they did, let me know in the chat, and I'll let people know. But how they will do it, he should be an incredibly charismatic guy, very quick, eager for a fight, and very effective in combat. So that is what we should be seeing of this guy, and I think probably he will be a bit like on Game of Thrones when you had like an army. They would always try and create a character who is the leader, who may or may not have been, brought to life a little bit more. So you had Grey Worm was the representative of the Unsullied, for example. When the Golden Company turned up, you had the leader guy. I can't remember who they said he was, but that was the focus of our attention. They will do that. Assuming they do have the Winter Wolves, then they will have a leader character who should be Roddy the Ruin. My instinct is that they're not going to major on his backstory or anything like that, but who knows? Let's go to Chaos Ballerina. Maester Vanyan's Against the Unnatural book contains certain proofs of dragons having existed in Westeros even in the earliest of days before Valyria rose to be a power. What proof is he talking about? Well, we don't know, is the short answer. We do know George R. Martin has said similar things, that dragons were indeed across Westeros back at that time. What proofs? I guess we would go with dragon bones as being a reasonable proof, and stories being passed down, and also so the very first humans drew had sort of scratched marks on stones and things like that, rather than had sort of books and things like that. So things along those lines can definitely sort of tell. So that's probably what it was really that is being talked about there. But short answer is we do not know. Okay, let's go to a question from Michelle Raimo, who is there. I saw her a moment ago, actually, saying, "Hi, Robert. Hello. I hope all is well with you and Dan the dog. Thank you. I was shocked at the end of Sunday's House of the Dragon episode, to say the least. Yeah, not just you. The versions we are given in Fire and Blood never mention a self-inflicted death due to kinslaying. What did you think of that change, and did you like it? I was so excited thinking Eric was going to live, and then my hopes were dashed. I thought it was a nice, albeit sad, change from the books. Um, and thank you for all you do. All the video drops during the week are keeping me sane until Sunday. Good. Well, that makes me very happy. What did I think? I really liked it. I have to say, this was one of those. I'm obviously a book person, but when a change happens that I think works well, I want to acknowledge it. And I think on this occasion, that worked better than the versions that we had in Fire and Blood, because there were Fire and Blood tells the stories of, and this person says such and such, and this person says such. Basically, we're told. One of our sources says, and they fought for a glorious battle for hours, for an hour, but nobody could intervene because nobody knew who was who, and others say it was just a short and bloody encounter. But one of them says that, and I can't remember exactly which way around it was, but I think it was that Eric killed Aric, but he took a mortal wound, which took him an agonizing week to die from, kind of thing. So those were all there, but I liked it. There was a sadness to it, and it just felt very real. Those two characters, they had been building them up. They'd not been ever like a main focus of it, but you kind of knew the inevitability of them coming together, and it would have to be pretty horrible. And because could they, having killed the other part of their soul, could they carry on? No, of course they couldn't. Andrew K saying it was a bit surreal watching the Cargill twins, Cargill duel with my twin brother in the same room on our birthday. Wow, that must have been quite, quite odd. I'm glad you made it through, and I hope your twin enjoyed it as well. Film Cram saying I spent the whole next day convinced that Aric won the fight, and he called Rhaenyra by her title to honour the choice made by his brother to defend her. Interesting thought. I mean, this is the moment at which we're supposed to know that it was Eric. Is that so? He says, "Your Grace," which is how you refer to a king or queen, rather than princess, which is what he would have said, presumably, if it were Aric. But so we're supposed to believe that. I kind of understand that thinking, that you might think that he wished to honor it. If he knew that then he was going to commit suicide, he wished to sort of honor his brothers. But in a way, this is all about the system has forced the two of them, who both want to do their duty, to have to come to blows with each other. So it's not that it was that Aric having arrived there and he suddenly realized that actually the other guy was right. Aegon is a bit horrible. I really should have done. No, they both believed, as far as we can tell, they both believed to the end that they were doing the duty that they should have done. Incidentally, this is slightly different in the book in terms of their when they split apart, because on the show they were right up to the very beginning of the war, they were together. In the book, actually, Eric was with Rhaenyra for quite some time, since when Harwin Strong died, he was basically sent as Harwin Strong's replacement. So the the twins had been apart for years by the time of the war, and not just the matter of a few days or weeks that it was on the show. Let's go to a question. Kilgore Tully saying, I wonder if the show will ever acknowledge how the book version came to be. Raven lying about Eric's suicide and saying they died in each other's arms to preserve Eric's honor. Yeah, maybe they'll do that. They've tried to do a few nods to the book every now and then, I think, but no, this isn't something that they are desperately keen to be sort of showing how this came to be presented in the book in this particular way. They're ploughing their own furrow, they're making their own story, and if they can do a little nod to the book every now and then, fine. But that's not one of their aims with this. Commander Ray saying, how much of a role will we see the Maesters play in the dance? And do you think they'll be shown to be trying to diminish the power of the dragons? I was more hopeful for this in season 1, it has to be said. In season 1, we did see them sort of whispering in people's ears, and they were the ones there treating Viserys and things along those lines. And the link across to the High Towers was made quite clear. So I had some hopes that they might go down this route, but realistically, they haven't in season 2. We basically just see the Maesters are kind of now just a part of the 2 small councils. So I don't think they would have had to set it up a bit more if they were going to show the Maesters as a whole having an agenda. It's not something that they pushed hugely in season 1. They hinted at it, but they didn't push it, and now they've kind of stepped back from that completely. So I don't think we're going to go down that route. 444 saying, hi, Robert. Rather a comment than a question. When I first read in Fire and Blood about identical Kingsguard twins duel to death, I wanted to see it on screen, and I must admit it's better than I imagined. I like that they met not just by pure chance, but most probably due to Myseria's intervention. Yeah, I think I liked that as well. And then George R.R. Tolkien said, salutations, Robert. Salutations to you too, sir. Who do you think that silver-haired fellow was that was watching the hanged rat catchers? Could it be a dragon seed? You'll remember this guy. He's the person, he comes along, he steals a bit of food or something from somebody's backpack and then sort of stares up at the rat catchers, asks somebody who they were. Attention was drawn to him. And 444 on the same issue says in the scene in the behind the scenes episode, The House That Dragons Built, it was revealed that the character with the long grey hair who went to see the hanging rat catchers is named Ulf. Yes, so the actor was said something and then it said Ulf underneath it. My guess is that this is the third of the dragon seeds, Ulf the White. As he seems not to be a man-at-arms, this is another one after Hugh with changed backstory, and the second who is in King's Landing instead of Dragonstone or Driftmark. In Fire and Blood, I found both Hugh and Ulf as extremely unsympathetic characters. Here, so far, I can't say anything bad about them. What's the plan here, in your opinion? Well, I've talked about Hugh Hammer. So Ulf, they didn't draw attention to him. They didn't mention him by name in the episode. But yeah, inside the episode, mini episode, then he did have a name. So this is who it is. We have now seen Ulf the White. So we've now seen 3 of the 4 dragon seeds, and crucially, the 3 who will get their dragons first. So it's possible that we won't see Nettles for a little bit. So these 3 are there. Adam Velaryon is on Driftmark, where Sea Smoke is. That link seems reasonably obvious. We can see that. Hugh Hammer, we can kind of work out a way where he might go over there, but I agree. So far, he seems quite a sympathetic character. Ulf the White, we haven't seen much of him yet. We've literally just seen those few seconds. Now, what they did try to do was a little bit of character establishment in that he appears on the scene. We know that there are food shortages in King's Landing, and there's somebody who's got like this big basket on their back with I can't remember whether it was apples or potatoes. It was something like that, and he just like grabbed one and carried on walking. Now that was stealing. That was so not a huge crime, but in a time when food is short, that actually is quite a significant thing and says a lot about his character. So these are the kinds of small things that filmmakers think about a lot. Establishing shots for new characters. What can we learn about his character? He thinks about himself before he thinks about other people. He's so therefore selfish in some kind of way. He is a rules breaker rather than a rules taker. And he also seems to be a bit of a loner. Those are the things that we've got from this one thing here. It wasn't just him and a bunch of mates coming along, it was just him. And he took some food. So that's what we've got. That implies to me, I don't want to read too much into that few seconds that we got there, but that implies to me that they're setting him up as a less sympathetic character than Hugh Hammer. So Hugh may turn a sort of darker character later, but I think that we'll be given reasons why. Ulf, I think, is starting out as being a not particularly pleasant character. In the chat, and Reflective Rambling saying they're going to have to work to make me believe anyone is worthy of dearest Silverwing other than my beloved queen. Yeah, I don't think that they will show that Ulf White is particularly worthy of anything. Which again, it's going to be interesting. So we're going to get these questions when the Dragon Seeds happens. It obviously gets a bit of focus here on the in Fire and Blood, but the question is going to be who are these people? Are they worthy? Can we trust them? This is a huge shift, and it's not it. We don't think about it as much as we probably should. The Targaryens kept this their own monopoly, having access to dragons for so long, centuries, millennia. The Valyrians kept it, who were the dragon-riding families. Not all Valyrians are allowed to ride dragons, just the ones in those select families. And then in one fell swoop, they've opened this up and said anyone can try. Anyone can come along. And now it's a matter of, okay, you've just given this person the medieval fantasy equivalent of a nuclear weapon, and we know nothing about this person's background. This is going to be huge. And when you start thinking about it in that context, when Rhaenyra in the book starts to get very nervous about these new dragon riders, you can actually understand it. She's presented as being a little bit paranoid in the book, but I think that we'll actually see that there's understandable reasons behind all this. So if we get Alyn of Hull, who seems like a nice enough guy, but is he related off to Corlys Velaryon? That's a little bit of uncertainty going on there. Then we get Hugh Hammer, who seems like a solid person in both physical as well as moral senses of the world, but perhaps he's going to have a tragic backstory by the time he gets there. And if we get Ulf White, who claims a dragon, and maybe he doesn't seem like a good guy, it'll create quite a lot of tension in that scene. It's not just a matter of now we've got more dragons and now we can go and win a war. It's what have we unleashed? We've given these guys who we don't know anything about dragons. And not just any old dragons, Vermithor in particular, Silverwing, massive old dragons. Vermithor's after Vhagar, Vermithor's the next biggest, oldest, and most dangerous dragon. Sarah Awesome Sauce saying, just a show of love and support for an excellent creator making fantastic content. Thank you very much. Shout out to the best moderators in the game. Yes, another moderator shout out. We can never have enough of them. And I think that's what's going. I think I'm up to date in the chat. Let's go to Kelly Summers saying, I have a series of questions about the idea of power. I've been thinking about Varys's riddle about where power resides. He says the answer is that power resides where men believe it resides, but that seems to beg the question, which men? And then we get the point here is that it's whoever they think, in his riddle, the three try to convince the sellsword, each believing power resides with themselves, but the survivor seems to be determined by which the sellsword believes, which is more or less what Bronn says. Cersei makes a similar point in a different context when she's talking about power is power. Maybe power resides where the men with objective power believe the subjective power resides. Was Varys right? And the shorter question is, during the dance, where would Varys, Cersei, and Bronn and Littlefinger have said true power resided at the beginning? What about where we are now in the story? So it's interesting, this where is power? So fundamentally here, power is with the dragons, because the dragons are, by a long way, the most powerful beings there in Westeros. So where is power? Power is with who controls the dragons. Now, at the moment, what's quite interesting is that Aemond is deemed to have quite a lot of power because he has Vhagar. But we know, and he knows, no one else seems to know, he does not have full control over Vhagar. So where does the power actually reside there? Actually with the dragon itself. And the balance of power is set up quite well, I think, by George R. R. Martin, in that we've got the Team Green, who have got dragons which are old and mature and include the biggest and most powerful dragon, compared to Team Black in the book, where they have, yes, 2 or 3 very impressive dragons and dragon riders, but most of the rest of their team are very young on very small dragons. They've aged up Baelor, they've aged up Jacaerys, Lucerys. These in the book, they're much younger, their dragons are much smaller, they've never flown in combat before. So that keeps the two sides on balance. Bringing the dragon seeds should be the thing which tilts the balance over to Team Black, if you can trust them. So that's where we talk about power. So who would those characters, those Song of Ice and Fire characters, say has power? Well, fundamentally, I think that they would say, to start with, Team Green had the power, but they squandered their chance. And then in the longer run, you'd have to say Team Black have the power. It's a rather basic point to make, but Team Black had more dragons, they had more dragon riders, they had some spare dragons lined up. If they were patient, if they waited 5 years, then they would have huge dragon superiority. But that wasn't the way that the war went. Let's go to James Horner saying, hello, Robert. Have you seen Hills Alive's video on Blood and Cheese? No, I have not. I didn't get much time to watch anyone else's videos, I'm afraid, particularly when the show's on. But I will try my best to check that out. I don't really know Hills Alive, but shout out to them. She makes the argument that Daemon knew that they would mess up and kill Jaehaerys, based on the fact that they were obviously not up to the task. Also, it would cause Aegon to act impulsively and make mistakes. However, as was stated in episode 2, Jaehaerys should have been much better guarded, and Daemon had no way of knowing that he wasn't. But nobody in their right mind would have sent those two to kill Aemond. He would have have to been passed out drunk for them to succeed. What do you think? Well, I mean, I haven't seen the video, so I don't know all of the logic behind it. The I mean, the argument that Daemon would have known that these guys were going to mess up, I think, is an understandable one. But the plan got them in and within striking distance of a Targaryen. It has to be said that the show did it slightly different to the book. So in the book, they knew where they were going. They just kind of appeared there. They knew the routines of the royal family. They knew that so the target, they seem to have got their target. Them wanting to aim for Aegon is not in the book. So Aemond was not in the book. They knew where to go. They went to Alicent's chambers because Helena always brought her children to Alicent's chambers at a certain time just before bed. So this was all planned out. They seem to have managed to go through with their plan pretty much as they intended. So that seems quite solid and professional. On the show, it does seem like I think the showrunner used the phrase "a heist gone wrong," but still, they got in. They got to wander around. Nobody really questioned them. They did get to Aemond's quarters, and if Aemond had been asleep, they could probably have killed him. So I don't think it was like the equivalent of "I'm going to hire a faceless man," and I can guarantee that they will with precision kill the person that I want. I think in show, Daemon goes with people, the only names that he's got, and thinks, well, if you should be able to get this person. If you can't, then get somebody else. That seems to be the implication. And his trust in them was reasonably well founded. They did, in fact, kill a royal prince. Old school 3000 saying, repaying the favor for Commander Ray, paying it forward, love it. Pick up a question for Commander Ray. Are dragons good, evil, just animals, or something else? Well, they're not just animals, they're magical animals. They to say that they are all good or all evil, I suspect, is probably oversimplifying it. John Martin has said, just out of pure interest, he said that if you imagine them as having the intelligence of a clever dog, that's the kind of level they're at. So it's not that they're there scheming and planning things with all these kind of long-term calculations. They are kind of living in the moment, but not just like a stupid animal, actually quite a clever animal. So that's what we're talking about here. Are they good? Are they evil? I think they're just being dragons. And this particularly comes out when you get dragons killing sheep. When Dany's dragons start killing sheep, the question is, does that make them evil? No, it just makes them doing what dragons naturally do. They hunt and they need to feed. So they don't think, oh, I shouldn't go those sheep over there. Maybe I'll fly over to this place here and try and catch some wild something. That's not what they're thinking about. So I think notions of good or evil aren't quite right, but the danger is to humans, which means that we could perhaps view them as a threat, if not necessarily evil. Ajovi, you saying, speaking of dragons having agency, do you think King's Landing gets burnt down because Drogon acts independently as Vhagar did? This is a really interesting question, which did come up after that episode when Vhagar very clearly was disobeying instructions. Now, that would be quite a long setup for what happened with Drogon on the TV. This is a TV show, not the book. Um, these things, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the book, but the theme of not having control of dragons is strong in House of the Dragon. Viserys talks about it. We see it happen not just with Aemond and Vhagar, but also with Luke and Alex. They he says no to his dragon, and his dragon ignores him. So this idea that you cannot necessarily control your dragon is a really important one, and it has at least one implication already in A Song of Ice and Fire. Dany couldn't control Drogon straight away, and so Drogon flew her off into the middle of the Dothraki Sea, and she can't get Drogon to take her back. So we've already had one implication of that. Is she suddenly going to magically learn how to always control Drogon? No, unless she gets hold of a dragon horn and knows exactly how to use that. So does that leave open the possibility that Drogon might go a bit rogue? You have to say that that possibility is now there. Is it likely? I will leave that to you to make up your own minds. But I think House of the Dragon has added in that possibility now. TK of Dol Amroth, a Lord of the Rings question. Thank you. What are your thoughts on the Children of Húrin? In my opinion, it feels near perfect, but it should have included Húrin's story to the end. So, for those who don't know, Children of Húrin is a story set back in the first age of Middle Earth that was published actually quite recently, only a few years ago. Christopher Tolkien pulled it together from his father's notes, so it's a full story, a complete story, and it's a tragedy. I think it's some of the best writing Tolkien's done. I think it's excellent. I think it ends in the right place myself. That's just my take. This is about the children, um, and yes, we need to see just the last sight there of what happens afterwards. But the whole point of the tragedy, I won't ruin it for anyone who's not read it, but the whole point of the tragedy, this brings them together, and what happens then, that for me, that is the right time. Let's go to a question from Commander Ray. Who actually in the chat, Commander Ray, I see you're there in the chat, actually talking about this, saying evil isn't the right word, more like, are they aggressive beyond normal? Is it because, like a dog, they take the owner's personality? I think there's a hint of both of those things there. But you asked a question over on Patreon, saying it doesn't stand to lament the ending of Game of Thrones, but with 2 books to go, it stands to reason that a lot can change in George's mind and writings. While a difficult task, I want to ask how much different his books could end from the show, and if it will lead to a different outcome. Side note, your thoughts on a remake of the show after the books finish, perhaps even animation. So I'll answer the second bit of that first. If you'd asked me 5 years ago if we were going to get a remake of Game of Thrones, I'd have said no. I can't see it at all. Now I can definitely see it as a possibility. If the books get finished, I could see there being a big clamour for the book version of what happened to appear on screen somewhere. HBO will know that people will want to see that. I think you're right that probably the way that they could do this is animated. We've also got whatever you may think about it for various reasons, we've also got a recent example of a well-loved series of books being adapted and then readapted just a few years later with Harry Potter, which yes, it is HBO actually, are they are adapting, if you've missed this story, the Harry Potter books for TV. which is obviously only a few years after. It's still very fresh in all of our minds what the films look like. So if HBO are willing to be going down that route there, then I think that they would probably be willing to go down that route with A Song of Ice and Fire once they've got the source material. So that's that bit done. But you're asking about the difference at the end of the story for the books to the TV show. Well, what I decided to do is just go back to the most recent time when George R. R. Martin, this is 2 years ago, George R. R. Martin in a blog post talked about this very issue, because he recognizes the fact and as you'll see I've got a quote here, quite an extensive quote from him actually, where he's talking about being a Gardner writer, which means that he doesn't have a set plan and things do shift and change as he writes. So we should expect him to change things, not just against the original idea, but against where he was a few years ago, and compared to what he would have said to the showrunners of Game of Thrones when he had that famous handover meeting with them some point between seasons 4 and 5. So this is what he said a couple of years ago, which I find a fascinating insight into this very question. He says, another question that I get a lot, especially since the end of Game of Thrones, is whether A Song of Ice and Fire will end the same way. An architect writer, would be able to give a short, concise, simple answer to that, but I am much more of a gardener. My stories grow and evolve and change as I write them. I generally know where I'm going, sure. The final destinations, the big set pieces, they've been in my head for years, for decades, in a case of A Song of Ice and Fire. There are lots of devils in the details, though, and sometimes the ground changes under my feet as the words pour forth. Now, I'll pause there. I've got more to talk about in more of this quote in just a moment, but just this headline here is to say that he does know the endings. He does know the big set piece, so that those things are largely there, but things change. He wishes to emphasize the things which will change. I will say this, he says. What I've noticed more and more of late is my gardening is taking me further and further away from the television series. Yes, some of the things you saw on HBO in Game of Thrones you will also see in The Winds of Winter, though maybe not in quite the same ways, but much of the rest will be quite different. One thing I can say, in general enough terms that I will not be spoiling anything, not all of the characters who survived until the end of Game of Thrones will survive until the end of A Song of Ice and Fire, and not all of the characters who died on Game of Thrones will die in A Song of Ice and Fire. Some will, of course, maybe most, but definitely not all. Of course, I could change my mind again next week with the next chapter I write. That's gardening. And the ending, you will need to wait until I get there. Some things will be the same, a lot will not. So that's what he says. That is what George R. R. Martin says. Basically, yes, there's going to be changes. There are definitely going to be changes to what you saw on Game of Thrones. He knows roughly where he's going towards, but he's moving further away from that all the time. I hope that kind of answers the question. Sarah A saying, "Hi Robert, hope all is well. Just out of curiosity, have you already thought about how much of it? We're kind of moving now, I should say, from the House of the Dragon specifically to slightly more broad questions. I've got a few Song of Ice and Fire questions, a couple of Lord of the Rings ones we'll do at the end. But let's talk about sort of the wider Song of Ice and Fire stuff first." Saying, Sarah's asking if I've already thought about how much of a grace period you'd want to give people once The Winds of Winter is out before I'd create content on it. I would love to know what people think here, because yes, I have thought this. I don't know when it's going to come. Always hopeful, but not expectant. But when it does, I'm going to find myself a room, barricade the door, and just read my way through the book until I've finished it. That's the plan. No idea how long that will take. Probably well over a day, maybe a couple of days, maybe even more. Who knows? But what I tend to do on these live streams is I don't want to spoil TV shows, but I'm happy with books have been out for a long time. How long would I leave it? I'd love to know what you think. What do you think is the timings here? My instinct is to say I can go straight in and do some non-spoilery stuff. Um, but most people won't be able to set aside a couple of days or whatever it is to non-stop read their way through a new book. So most people will be, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks, months, years before they even get to read it. So instinctively, I think I will make sure that my thumbnails and titles are non-spoilery, and then I put spoiler warnings at the front, and then I do the content explaining it from quite early on once I've read it through. But I would love to know what you guys think. Anna Sanchez saying a week at least. Um, uh, and Levac saying it'll be done within a week, but 1 month is a graceful choice of waiting period. Um, then Effective Ramblings saying I know I'm a slow reader unless I can get an audiobook copy. I imagine the audiobook will come out at the same time, but I'd say at least a few weeks. But try to do a live stream about maybe a month in just for the spoiler talk. And Reflective Ramblings also saying thumbnail warning, pre-recorded content with spoilers. Yeah, so Karina Strick saying Twitter will be deactivated for the duration of the read. I suspect places like that will be the more spoilery. Andrew K saying I may have to miss a few streams if The Winds of Winter is released. I tend to read the main of Song of Ice and Fire a bit slower to take all the details in. Yeah, and Commander Ray saying gonna have to turn phone off. Agreed. So yeah, I think I'm kind of getting the impression that I'll be careful on the live streams, but maybe the pre-recorded stuff once I've done it, as long as I flag it up, then I think that will probably work. Reflective Ramblings of Pick Up a Question. Thank you very much for Ik Ben Pick 1984. Will you ever make a channel or use these ones to analyze books you cover on your Well Told Tale channel? Yes, for those who don't know, I've got another channel called The Well Told Tale, where it's an audiobook channel. I just read stories, and I try and read the best fantasy and science fiction stories that are out there, public domain ones at the moment. I'm hoping to change that at some point. But there are some fantastic stories out there. So we've got Conan stories, we've got things like War of the Worlds, Call of Cthulhu. I'm currently reading through 1984, which is absolutely fantastic. So there's some really good stuff on there. I've thought several times about whether over on that channel I might do a few sort of discussion groups or something like that. That it would be quite time consuming and take time away from what I'm doing over here is the issue. So I've thought about it, but I've never really found the time. It's the honest answer. I could reduce my amount of time doing this and then spend my time doing that. I think the thing I love doing most is reading the stories to people and just opening up those stories. So yes, I would love to have discussions and analyze them, but not in the immediate future. I'm just having a quick flick through the chat. Matthew Stewart saying, ever thought about covering any Sherlock stories? Not sure what the deal is with it in public domain. Sherlock Holmes, complete digression. Sherlock Holmes is a really interesting one. I don't know whether this is still the situation. Most Sherlock Holmes is public domain, which is why you get so many Sherlock Holmes TV shows, Sherlock Holmes this, that, why Sherlock Holmes randomly appears things all over the place because the majority of it is public domain. However, the last collection of short stories certainly was, I don't know the situation now, but certainly was not in the public domain, which has meant that we've got this really kind of strange kind of breakdown in the character of all the things you know about Sherlock Holmes, the deerstalker hats, the pipe, all of these kind of the imagery that we've got, the things that he plays the violin, all of this very clear characterization is there because it's in the public domain in those views. But there are other bits which only appear in that last collection of short stories, like his retirement to Sussex, like the fact that he was a beekeeper. This kind of thing we don't get, isn't part of the popular conception of Sherlock Holmes because it was not in the public domain. So I find that an absolutely fascinating thing that the character we have is in the public conception of Sherlock Holmes is 80 to 90% of the book conception because of public domain rules. As I say, complete digression, but I find it fascinating myself. Um, Kelly Summers maybe asking if we could have a Discord. Yeah, I keep on thinking about it. If the moderators would love to, then I'll happily set that up. I have to be reminded about this, but yes, that's definitely something on my radar. Okay, let's. Yeah, Reflective Running saying they still incorporate beekeeping in a couple of versions, though. They do. Sometimes it's if they have bought the rights to that, and sometimes, and it might be that that is now in the public domain as well. But for a long time, it wasn't. Was the point? Let's go to Moon saying, "Hi, Robert. First of all, I'm wondering how often do you rewatch an episode to make the breakdown video and to do the live stream?" Well, I will watch it. What I've decided to do is this time I watch the first run through just for as a fan. I will watch the first time. I didn't do this last time, and I realised that actually, you know what, I don't want to just watch these with a pen in my hand scribbling things down. I actually just want to enjoy the episode sometimes. So first of all, I will just watch it as just as everyone else does. Then the second time, I will do a stop, start, watch through, pause, note, write some notes. Then I will write the episode, my breakdown. And while I'm doing that, I will be going back if I missed a thing there, and so I will sort of go in and out of something rather than watch it from beginning to end. And then for these, then I don't tend to rewatch again before this live stream, but I often do before the pre-show live stream, which I do on a Sunday. And then you also asked me about Doctor Who, which I don't normally cover on this channel, but I think most of you know that I am a Doctor Who fan. This is Moon saying, I was disappointed with the revelation of Ruby's mum. So there was a new season of Doctor Who, a soft reboot, and also an injection of money. Doctor Who doesn't always have money, a big budget. But they signed a distribution deal with Disney, and so if you want to watch Doctor Who now, it's on Disney Plus, unless you're in the UK, in which case it's only on the iPlayer. Yeah, so that's been quite a big difference for the franchise. But you're saying, will the Doctor go looking for Rogue? Rogue did ask the Doctor to go looking for him, so will he? Perhaps. I think. I don't think that's going to be like the main driving force. This is just a guesswork. I don't know anything. But yes, it would not surprise me if we see Rogue again. To rambling. I'm not. I haven't spoiled anything on Doctor Who. Do not worry. The Maura Lee saying, are there any more updates on the play The Iron Throne? Is there a release date yet? So this is interesting for those who don't know this. George R. Martin has said that he is in active development of a stage play about the tourney at Harrenhal, which has currently got the title The Iron Throne. The last update we had was towards the end of last year. I think it was about December of last year. And he said that he was hopeful that it might appear at the end of this year, 2024. We've heard nothing since. I don't know. I have to admit, I'm not in the world of theatrical production, so I don't know the timings of all of this. George R. Martin, entirely coincidentally, is back over in my part of the world in next month or August, perhaps. And he's going to pop into the set of Duncan Egg, and then he's also going to go to Worldcon, which is in Glasgow this year. Now, what he often does, he seems to come across the UK relatively regularly for business reasons as well as personal ones, and he often has a huge amount of meetings while he is over here. So it would not surprise me if we get another mini update from him at some point after that. But yeah, I don't know the time it takes from having a complete script to actually getting the production on stage. That's if there's somebody in that world in the chat, then please drop information down there. I'll happily share that. But he was feeling confident. He thought they'd nearly finished it. And that's about it. I wish I could give you more of an update, but we've not had anything now for 6 months from him on it. My feeling is that it's not that he seemed to think the writing was fine. He seemed to think they were nearly there. It might be simply a matter of staging a production and getting the right theatre. Bombadillo saying you're still going. Wow, yes, absolutely. So sometimes these open Q&As do go on for a little while. And let's go to Paul Al-Gaib saying, two broader Song of Ice and Fire questions. Do we know of any calendar system in Essos? It would not make sense for the Free Cities to use the before or after Aegon's conquest. No, we don't, is the short answer. We haven't been told of the calendar systems in Essos. The implication is that they probably have different ones in different places. There's not just one monoculture. Certainly the Dothraki would probably use a very different one to what's used in Slavers Bay, what is used in the Free Cities. I think a lot of people assume that probably the Free Cities who were covered, or if not ruled by the Valyrian freehold, then certainly somewhere without Bravos, very linked to it, that reactive against it. They may well use the Doom as a kind of a base for a calendar. We have no evidence that they do, but that seems like as good a guess. But George Martin has not told us. Paul Algabe also asking, why are there no Valyrian steel weapons throughout the nobility of the Stormlands? A region with such strong martial tradition, it would fit to see a sword or two, especially for House Durrandon or Baratheon. Yes, so this is an intriguing kind of subplot point here with the Valyrian steel swords. We're told that there are a bit over 200 Valyrian steel blades in Westeros. We know that they're hugely expensive, but we only know the whereabouts of, I think it's 8, which is incredibly low number. We know of quite a few others that have kind of disappeared over the years, that have gone missing. 2 of those being Blackfire and Dark Sister, of course, that are very much out there somewhere. But that still doesn't account for much at all. Maybe 10% of the Valyrian steel blades we know about. Now, we're told blades, not swords, so it's entirely possible that some of them might be little pocket knives or daggers or something like that. But even so, it does seem a little bit weird that some big and impressive houses like the Baratheons, like the Tyrells, for example, don't seem to have a Valyrian steel sword. Now, is there a reason for this? We're not really given one. You'd mentioned the Stormlands. There's none in the Stormlands. I think I'm right in saying that we don't know of any in Dawn either, or the Reach. So it's not just the Stormlands. This is quite. Well, I suppose we have one in the Reach House Tarly, with Heartsbane, but there's not many there. So it's not that the Stormlands is being set apart as this is a weird place because there's no Valyrian steel swords. There's a lot of places that don't have them. It's probably fair to say that the significance of Valyrian steel swords increased as George R. R. Martin. We've already heard him say he's a Gardner writer. The significance of Valyrian steel swords grew in the writing of the story. So that probably can help explain why some of these houses we're just not told that they've got them, because at the start he didn't think this was going to be such an important thing. But yeah, it's a mystery that I think we're probably never going to really get an answer to why some very big and impressive houses. I mean, say House Baratheon was only established after the Doom, but House Durrandon they probably would have just taken theirs if they'd had one, and it seems hard to understand why House Durrandon wouldn't have had one. Alexandra Vladimir saying Dunk should have brought Sweetfoot back, or bought Sweetfoot back when he got a tea prince for a squire, and why bring old Chestnut to Dawn? Shame. Still love Doug. Still love Dunk, and Sheep Stealer. Yes. I mean, I'm always with the Dunk love and the Sheep Stealer love. Dunk has a lot of these financial questions about buying armor, about buying back horses. One of the things which is very noticeable about Duncan Egg is the fact that we're not told it's like this, but he is sort of teaching Egg the value of money. Egg is walking around with a massive fat ruby in his boot most of these stories, as a we can get out of this if we need to. But Dunk never wants to do that. He wants to earn money by being a knight in tourneys and things like that, even though he doesn't seem to be that good as a tourney knight. So that's how he wants to be earning his money, not just by getting largesse from the fact that Egg is fabulously rich, which is therefore a plot point because it is telling us about the characters. So reflective rambling say the talking about Chris Philosopher Games streams. His streams are epic length. If you want long streams, then go to him. So sometimes he goes 5, 6, 7 hours talking about Tolkien. Very impressive. Amanda is back. Hi there, Amanda. Good to see you. Come back. Let's. So Maura Lee asking about Night of the Seven Kingdoms update. I think we've done that one already. So, friend saying, hi, Robert, hope all is well. Thank you, it is. You've talked before about the likelihood that the others will, or at least did, descend from northeastwards of the five forts at the same time as the north of the wall. Do you think there could be a mention of this in the Song of Ice and Fire? A cheeky epilogue from a guard that would be interesting. Similarly, do you see Essos being essentially forgotten in a Song of Ice and Fire once Dany lands in Westeros? Best wishes, warmest regards. Best wishes, warmest regards back to you. In terms of the five forts, yeah, this is the working assumption from, I think, from most of Song of Ice and Fire people, is that the five forts are a sort of wall equivalent. The others did come in and attack. This is just from the legends from UT. In the first long night from that direction, from the northeast, and the five forts are there, a wall equivalent of keeping a watch out. So that's a kind of a working assumption there. Might we see something there? I mean, instinct is to say no. I I think we will probably hear stories. This is the way that George R. R. Martin tends to use the far-flung places of Essos. He likes this idea that we don't know exactly what is out there. That's sort of the grey areas of the map where we don't really understand exactly what it is. And I think we will get the equivalent of when we start getting rumours in A Song of Ice and Fire about Dany's dragons. The difference is that we know what's going on with Dany's dragons, but I think we will have the rumours without actually seeing what's going on. So sailors will arrive in Westeros bringing stories of a really cold winter that just to the north and the far over in Essos, and some strange creatures coming back from dead or something like. We will start getting these rumors from Essos, but I don't think we're actually going to go over there. George R. R. Martin tends to use prologues and epilogues for the main story, not to be necessarily advancing the main story in and of themselves, but setting up the information that we need and the themes that we need for that book. Now, could he? He's definitely a good enough writer to include something over all the way over in UT that has no relevance to anything else that's going on. But my instinct is you probably won't. As for whether I see Essos being essentially forgotten in A Song of Ice and Fire once Dany lands in Westeros, I mean, I don't think forgotten is the right way of saying this, but the story is told through points of view. We see this story from POV characters, and by the end of the Winds of Winter, probably we won't have any POV characters in Essos anymore. Probably we're going to have Arya headed back over from Braavos onto the mainland in Westeros. Probably we'll have the characters who are currently over in Slavers Bay and a bit north. Dany currently in Dothraki Sea, Tyrion. Who else have we got over there? So Barristan, Victarion. Probably we will have those characters all headed off westwards and arriving in Westeros, which means that we don't have POV characters there anymore, which means, as I say, I think forgotten is probably the wrong way of saying it, but we won't see it firsthand. Let's go with A Son of Ice and Fire. I have hello everyone, hi there. I have a theory that the two Targaryen Valyrian steel swords, Blackfire and Dark Sister, will eventually end up with Jon Snow and Daenerys, respectively. Blackfire is described as a bastard sword, a hand and a half sword, and we all know the history of the Blackfire Rebellion has been caused by Aegon IV giving Blackfire to Daemon Blackfire rather than Daeron. Jon's whole story is him living as a bastard, even if he technically isn't one, suddenly getting a claim to the Iron Throne, hinting at similar story beats to Daemon Blackfire. Longclaw is also a bastard sword, so he has experience wielding a similar blade. Dark Sister is mentioned as being a more slender blade and more suited towards a woman, and we all know that the first known wielder is Visenya, who Daenerys has much in common with. While Daenerys isn't known for using swords, perhaps she could wield the sword symbolically, like how some Targaryen kings wielded Blackfire while not being great fighters, or maybe she could give it to one of her Queensguard. What are your thoughts on what will happen to the two swords by the end of the story? Okay, so I love the logic there. I thought that made absolute sense. Certainly, the bastard sword and the Jon link is, I think, quite a strong one. I won't go into huge detail on this, but I think that it's reasonably clear. Dark Sister is in Bloodraven's cave north of the Wall. I think that is going to be brought back by Bran or Mira, whoever it is who manages to escape down south, and that will make its way to the Wall. I don't think it will go any further south. By the time you get to the Wall, you're going to find a whole load of people, or Winterfell, wherever it is they end up, a whole load of people who realize how important Valyrian steel swords are in fighting the others. Absolutely critical. And if a Valyrian steel sword appears, they're not going to let that go somewhere else. That's going to be staying at the Wall. So I think that will be given to somebody at the Wall to be, or at Winterfell to be using it. I still quite like this idea that maybe Arya could end up with it as Dark Sister. Uh, Mira, I think, will have first dibs on it, as she's probably going to be carrying it down. But beyond that, I wouldn't really wish to speculate. I think Dany ending up with it, maybe, as I say, but as you kind of implied, she's not really a sword person, so it would just be ceremonial. And I think that the need for Valyrian steel swords would be too great to be having her with a ceremonial sword. Blackfire, I think, is going to resurface. I think that this will be given to Aegon the Sixth, Fagon, as another kind of symbol of legitimacy, that he's going to have the sword Blackfire, and so that's going to be in King's Landing. I have a feeling it'll probably stay there, being used by whoever. So that's the kind of thing that Dany might then take if she takes King's Landing at some point. Why she might then take that as a symbol of legitimacy. Jon, certainly for the beginning bits of the story, I don't think is going to be coming down to the beginning bits. The next chunk of the story is not going to be coming down to King's Landing, and I kind of hope that he ends up with the sword Dawn. That's just my. It's what I want. That's a long way. That has to first of all presumably be taken by Darkstar. I think Darkstar will probably go and join with Fagon and join his Kingsguard to kind of add this extra legitimacy of having the Sword of the Morning as part of your Kingsguard, etc., etc. So I think that will come into play, and it will turn itself in. It will become Lightbringer. It already was, but it will be used as Lightbringer. So that's my kind of feeling on where they are. I liked your logic. I think we haven't got enough information to say for sure where these things would end up, but that's where I instinctively think they're going. Edin Sunek saying, I think to Dany, Drogon is her sword. I think that's entirely right. Let's go to Auntie Slayer. Says, can you share your thoughts on Jon's dream at the beginning of Jon 12 in A Dance with Dragons? It's maybe the strangest of all his dreams, and the eagle saying snow instead of it being a raven intrigues me. Thanks to you and the mods for the extra streams during this busy time. Yeah, absolutely. So this is context here. This is the penultimate, I think, chapter that Jon has before. So it's not the one where he ends up dead, but it's the one before that. And he's come to a deal to let the wildlings through the wall, let them south. Tormund is going to come through the next morning. That's the plan. They're going to open the gates. And sure enough, that's what happens. He starts having this dream. Understandably, this is completely against hundreds, thousands of years of Night's Watch policy, actually actively allowing the wildlings through. He's having quite a lot of dreams about this. This is obviously on his mind. And we read this. The start of the dream is that wildlings are attacking the wall, basically. Stand fast, Jon Snow called. Throw them back. He stood atop the wall alone. Flame, he cried. Feed them flame. But there was no one to pay heed. They are all gone. They have abandoned me. Burning shafts hissed upwards, trailing tongues of fire. Scarecrow brothers tumbled down, black cloaks ablaze. Snow! An eagle cried, as foemen scuttled up the ice like spiders. Jon was armored in black ice, but his blade burned red in his fist. As the dead men reached the top of the wall, he sent them down to die again. He slew a greybeard and a beardless boy, a giant, a gaunt man with filed teeth, a girl with thick red hair. Too late, he recognized Ygritte. She was gone as quick as she'd appeared. The world dissolved into a red mist. Jon stabbed and slashed and cut. He hacked down Donal Noy and gutted deaf Dick Follard. Corin Halfhand stumbled to his knees, trying in vain to staunch the flow of blood from his neck. I am the Lord of Winterfell, Jon screamed. It was Robb before him now, his hair wet with melting snow. Longclaw took his head off. Then a gnarled hand seized Jon roughly by the shoulder. He whirled and woke with a raven pecking at his chest. Snow? The bird cried. So what's going on here? Well, you can analyze. You can do a lot of analysis of this. I think I'll go with the sort of the top level here. That this is often interpreted, and I kind of like this as being this is Jon having a normal dream, an understandable dream about the wildlings attacking the wall. This is all kind of makes sense, but then it starts to shift into Azor Ahai holding the wall against the others imagery. So suddenly he's there on his own, no one else there. He's calling for fire against the people who are attacking. Then he sees the foemen scuttling up the ice like spiders. Ice spiders is very much that's an others thing going on there. Dead men now are coming towards him. The list of these people, there's all of these dead people. Ygritte, who's dead. Corin Halfhand is dead. Robb Stark is dead. All of these people who are coming at him are dead people. And then what's he wearing? Black ice armor. This feels like Valyrian steel armor. His blade burned red in his fist. He's holding Lightbringer. So this feels like a dream he had, which is being turned into this image of him as Azor Ahai fighting the whites, the others. Then at the end of all of this, he wakes up with a raven pecking at his chest. The blood raven idea is placed in our minds. I think at a very high level, this is blood raven intervening in Jon's dreams, turning understandable vivid dreams about what's going on in his world at that particular moment and turning them into ones where Jon is heroically fighting the army of the dead. So that's my high level take on that one anyway. And I've got a question from Martin S. Is someone is to be knighted by having a sword blade put on the shoulders? They better trust the person knighting them. Yep, absolutely. Yep, you do need to trust the person who's going to do that. Let's go to just having a quick flick through the chat. Somebody's birthday. I didn't see who it was, but happy birthday to you anyway. And Victor Rambling, thank you. Great to see you. Have a great rest of your day. Stephen, I have a general question about the Faceless Men. We all know, or at least suspect, that their activities during A Song of Ice and Fire, but do you have any theories about their role in other deaths from Westeros' history? Most obviously, there is the question of the Dance of the Dragons, but also, are there other suspicious deaths? Personally, I suspect that Maegor the Cruel was killed by a faceless man. I'm also convinced that Quentin Ball from the first Blackfire Rebellion was assassinated, though in that case it was probably Bloodraven who did the deed, since he was a master of both disguise and a bow. And when in doubt, so I actually, bizarrely, I did a video on this very topic less than a year ago. It's called something like "Who Have the Faceless Men Killed," and tries to go through not just who have they killed in the books, but who might they have killed going through history? Now, my general take is that through most of the Westerosi history for the last 300 years, probably not many, for the simple reason that the the people who could afford them, the high and mighty, have to be in almost every generation told that the Faceless Men exist. So you get Jaehaerys and Septon Bath, who go to Bravos in order to try and negotiate the return of some dragon eggs. Uh, they get told about the Faceless Men, which seems to imply they didn't already know about that. Then you certainly get the discussions in A Song of Ice and Fire, Robert Baratheon saying to the small council, I want you to go off and kill Daenerys. And they have to be told by Littlefinger about the Faceless Men. Some people know about them, others don't. So knowledge of the Faceless Men is actually quite limited. Arya certainly had never heard of the Faceless Men. She was brought up in a 1% family. She loved stories, but she'd never heard of the Faceless Men. So they're actually, although we see a lot of them, they're actually still not very well known in Westeros, which means that probably not many of the murders that we see are down to them. So, for example, Sept and Moon, also you go, does it feel like a Faceless Men assassination? The person literally ran out screaming from there. That doesn't sound right. They do it and make it look like it was an accident, a mishap or something, not cutting someone's throat. So what you should look for are the murders that don't look like murders. It's just the unexpected deaths. Now, Maegor is one that is possible. Pardon me. Maegor is possible because nobody saw it. It could get written down as an accident. But my instinct is that there were enough other people who were just happy to just kill him. So I don't think that we need to be looking for them. The one in Fire and Blood that is definitely down to them, I think, is House Roger. The heads of House Roger were killed when the Bank of Roger became very powerful, and the Iron Bank weren't happy with it. So I think that very clearly is, but most others, sadly, no. It's O'Reilly's name day. Happy birthday, happy name day, O'Reilly. Caius Ballerina, picking up a question for Miguel Romero. What type of white do you think Jon will be? Will he be able to sleep or eat or father children, since his spirit would have been safe inside Ghost? He would be a different kind of white. Yes, he will be absolutely. So whether he's a white or not is a very technical discussion of magic that I think George R. R. Martin is probably going to be happy for us to not have a full explanation of. So our best understanding of what's going to happen is that Jon Snow's body is killed. And we see the beginnings of this in the end of that chapter. He then calls out to Ghost, walks into Ghost. So his spirit is kept alive in Ghost. What's going to happen with his body? Well, they won't know what to do with his body. So they will do what they did with the other bodies previously, which was put it into the ice cells. Jon's body is going to be frozen, so it's preserved, as ice preserves, as Maester Aemon points out. So his body is going to be frozen and preserved. Then at some point, that's going to be reheated. I've speculated on how and why that might happen. His body's going to be reheated, and then his spirit, soul, whatever it is, will go pushed back into his body. So his body was kind of physically killed, but then preserved and brought back, and his soul or spirit will have gone elsewhere and then come back. So what does that make him the same as other whites. I mean, George R. R. Martin has kind of queued this up, talked about Beric Dondarrion being a fire white, and he was kind of set up as foreshadowing for Jon. So, I mean, it's hard to say. He is going to be an everything white. I think that Melisandre will be doing magic while this happens. Um, not thinking that she's going to be bringing Jon back to life. I think that he will have done this through the warging as well. So it's going to be complicated. And I think that he is going to be changed personality wise because he'll have been spending so long in his wolf. And we've been told that if you spend too long in your wolf, you become more wolfish. So he's going to become more wolfish. As for his body, um, uh, I mean, it's hard to say. Will he need sleep anymore? If he's not technically died, it might not be like that. So we don't know, is the short answer. Andrew Kay saying all bets are off with Jon's resurrection. A warg whose spirit in a dire wolf, in a star of soul jar, and a magical hinge of the world with different types of magic in close proximity. Exactly. Yeah, that's you said it more succinctly than I could. And let's go to, I've got 2 or 3 more questions. Nick from NJ saying, hello and greetings to Robert, Dan, and the marvellous mods. Dick Crabb is exactly the kind of character that George R. R. Martin writes best. Dubious intent, shifting goals based on opportunity, a bit of a blowhard, but entertaining and ultimately doomed because he's not a coward. Do you think that we will hear more from House Crab in the final 2 books? So, House Crab, an ancient house, once had the Whispers Castle, but that's been ruined and decrepit for perhaps 1,000 years. Um, uh, we meet Dick Crabb, who shows Brienne, guides Brienne to where um, a jester was spotted randomly because this is a clue that she's had a fool. It's not who she's actually looking for. Poor Dick Crabb does not do well out of all of this. Brienne spends a long time following a wild goose chase and has to head back. So it, we get a chapter or so of Dick Crabb, who's this as a guide, who is this fantastic character. Pardon me, sorry. It's getting quite late here. He's this fantastic character, Dick Crabb. He's very proud of his homeland and very clear. This is Cracklaw Point, and very um, uh, uh, focused in on it. His world experience doesn't appear to be great beyond there. He doesn't seem to understand how people could not have heard about the great legends of House Crab. Will we see them? I mean, there might be some more crabs out and about, but I don't think they're going to play a starring role anymore. Cracklaw Point is a bit out of the way. Then let's do a question from Martin S. Actually, this is on my last question from the chat. This is Lord of the Rings question. Now's the best time. If you've got any more questions, to drop them into the chat now. I'll try and answer as many of them as I can. Martin S. saying, hello, Robert. Could Elrond have claimed the throne of Gondor? No, listen, I know he would not be legally king of Gondor. However, he was the twin brother of the first king of Numenor, which was a parent kingdom of Gondor and Arnor. It might not legally make him king of Arnor, but if he came to Gondor's aid in a time of crisis, while Gondor had only a steward, especially early on when the line of the stewards was not yet strongly established, could he assemble support for such a claim in the absence of a descendant of Isildur and Anarion? Then there is this verse, the hands of the king are the hands of a healer, and so shall the rightful king be known, which Elrond would be able to fulfill. You know it's a moot point because Elrond didn't seem to want to be a king and never claimed the title of a king among elves, though he probably could. Yeah, so I think that last point is as you say, that's the key one, is that Elrond could have claimed to be king of the elves in the west and didn't ever claim that title. So there's no indication he would ever want to be king of somewhere else, Gondor say. Could he have claimed it? I think you're right in saying that Yes, technically he is of the same family if you go back far enough, but it is a long, long, long way. We're talking 7,000 years, long way back. So any kind of credibility to that claim, I think, is probably long gone. Now, Gondor had a track record of rejecting people who weren't from their own specific line of kings, and other people came in and said, "Hey, we've got a claim going in, including one of Aragorn's ancestors," and they said, "Nope, sorry, you're not from the right side of this line." Even though, yes, that we all know that though, everybody, both the kings of the northern and the southern kingdoms, were descended from Elendil. You came down the wrong side of that, so no. So I think that they would, as a point of principle, reject him. Could he have gone in there and done some magical healing and gained a few people on his side? Yes, but having a half-elven king, it, it doesn't really kind of fit with what he wanted or what the people wanted either. Right, let's have a quick look in the chat. Um, and Zach K saying, "Glad you caught some live. We are near the end, but I'm glad you could make it." Um, Magma Frost, silly question. Does House Cargill have the same etymological origins as House Carstark? I.e., is there ever a House Gill out there? I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think Car is universally used as a cadet branch prefix, but yeah, maybe it's a fun question, but I think the answer is no. And so yeah, Zach Case saying the stream is still going strong. Absolutely. KBNT, my Rhaegar Lyanna playlist. Yeah, I'm redoing them. Hopefully, if we do get the Iron Throne, the Tony at Harrenhal stage play, after that, because we will get a lot more information from that. So I'm redoing them, and I'll be re-uploading them later this year, possibly early next year. Okay. And Brandy R saying, "Thanks for staying up so late for all of us in different time zones." Yeah, I'm very aware that I say this is late for me. There will be people it's even later for. So, but with that, I think I am going to start drawing this one to a close. We have got another live stream coming up on Sunday. It's going to be my usual pre-show live stream for episode 3 of House of the Dragon. So that's something to be looking forward to. I've got another. Actually, we were talking about re-uploads. I've redone and improved another Lord of the Rings video. What happened to the Entwives video. That's going to be coming up tomorrow, hopefully, and then next week we'll be back into the usual episode breakdowns and lore videos for House of the Dragon. Okay, that's about it for this time. Thank you, moderators. Thank you, patrons, and thank you in the chat. Lots of fantastic questions. If you're watching this back a little bit later on YouTube, as opposed to X, if you're on X, hi, great to see you. I know that quite a few people were watching over there on X today. But if you're watching this back later on YouTube, appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to my Patreon page. That is all for this time. Thanks, everyone. Take care, and I will see you soon.